Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ethan Collier, and I'll be chairing today's meeting of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. I hope everybody's got an agenda in front of them. And Brian, did the slides that tell people how the meeting goes in terms of procedure and stuff, did those still play?
They still play.
Okay.
Yes.
So there have been some slides just telling everybody the procedures for today's meeting, but I'll go over them quickly in case you haven't seen them. Planning Commission has gotten this packet in the mail within the last couple of weeks, and Planning Commission's had the opportunity to review this in advance of today's meeting. And so at times, because of the fact that we've had this staff report for a number of weeks now, we do move really quickly through the agenda. And in some cases, we actually take action on a case without hearing a staff presentation or hearing from the applicant if there's no opposition and we have a staff recommendation to approve an applicant's request. So in every case, I will announce the case. I'll go in order through the agenda, and I will ask if there's any opposition present. If you're here and you have questions or you have concerns in regards to the case, that's the time where you raise your hand. You may not have considered yourself to be opposed to the application, but you just have a question or you have a concern, or there's something that you want to tell us as planning commissioners or staff. That's the time where you raise your hand. It's really super important that you raise your hand when I ask if there's any opposition present, if you actually want to speak. Because if you don't raise your hand, we'll likely not hear from you, because we'll hear from the applicant, we'll hear from staff, and we'll take action. In each case where we do actually hear from an applicant, staff, or opposition, the same procedures every single time. The applicant will get up. We'll normally hear a staff report from Mr. Schultz here. The applicant will come up to this mic on the right side of the room. The red light will be on, and you'll know that you can talk. The applicant will have 7 minutes to present the reason for the request. Also happens to be. So the applicant will have 7 minutes. And then the opposition, sometimes there's a lot of people that want to speak in opposition. We've had cases where 20 people want to speak in opposition. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2. I always ask the same thing for opposition: to get out of your chair, line up on my left, your right, all the way down that wall. That way I can see if there's 3 people that want to speak or if there's 20 people that want to speak. Either way, there's only 9 minutes for opposition to speak. I almost never, ever change that. So the total time allotted for opposition is 9 minutes, which means if you're the first person and you look behind you and you see 8 people behind you, that means that really you probably only have a minute to say what it is that you feel like you need to say. We want to hear it. But what's also really important is that as opposition presents reasons or things that we should give consideration to, it's important that you not be repeating yourselves. There have been times historically where opposition would get up and the first person would say that we should not approve the plan because of traffic. And they would tell us for 2 or 3 minutes about the traffic condition. The second person would get up and talk about traffic and state the exact same things. That isn't helpful to us as planning commission members. It doesn't help us make a better decision to hear it 9 times. And I don't allot more time than the 9 minutes. So just use that time wisely. We're really good at doing what we do in terms of taking information in, so you don't have to belabor a point. We want to hear from as many of you as possible. And then the applicant will have 2 minutes to get up and respond to whatever opposition has brought before us. We'll also tell you that all the conversation that happens today will be between the person at that microphone right there at the podium and the planning commission. That's really important because sometimes the person at the microphone thinks that they're addressing the crowd. Other times they want to ask us questions or they want to ask staff questions, and the conversation gets really weird. I do run a really tight ship in regards to the meeting. And so, you know, when you're at that mic, you're talking to planning commission members. And if we have any questions for you, we'll ask questions to you. But it's not, you know, this is not an open forum for everybody to talk whenever they want to talk. It's pretty strictly kept to those procedures. After the cases that we rule on today, the vast majority of them will go on to city council or county commission. We make a recommendation to those governing bodies in most cases. And so those dates should be out there somewhere on a piece of paper for you to follow up and make sure that, you don't just come to planning commission. After we take action today, they will go on to city council and county commission for final action. Brian, did I miss anything?
You did not. And I don't know if you want to know, Mr. Chairman, but there's two cases under new business that have been officially withdrawn. We did have some opposition. I don't know if you want to go ahead and, for me to list those so people can leave if they have to.
I would love to list those. Which are they?
Sure. The first item that has been withdrawn is case number 1 under new business, which is 2022-193 West Bell Development at 21 and 29 West Bell Avenue. That has been withdrawn.
Okay. So what Brian's saying is we're not going to hear that case today. So if you're here and you're in opposition and you were here in regards to that case, we're not going to hear it.
Correct. And the second one is item number 4 is 2022-0198 for Comfort Home Builders at 7512 Pinewood Drive. That's in the city of Chattanooga. That has been a request to withdraw. It has been accepted and will not be heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Anything else?
No, that's all I have.
All right, we'll get started. All right, at the top of the agenda, we have subdivision plats and variances. The first item on the agenda is case SD 2022-0028, and this is Eagle Park subdivision phase 3A, lot 72 through 88. And we have a staff recommendation to approve this. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0029, and this is the sanctuary at Signal Forest, lots 1 through 8 and 40 through 51, and lot 54, and it has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is SD 2022-0030, and this is High Clear Estates, lots 1 through 44, 1629 and 1631 Jenkins Road, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0031, and this is Madison Street subdivision, lots 1 through 23, and community lots 100 and 101, located at 1650 Madison Street, has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0032, and this is Edgestone subdivision phase 2, lots 24 through 44 on McDaniel Lane, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission?
Second.
We have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Matthews recused himself. Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0033, and this is a variance at Prairie Pass, Phase 5, located at 3601 Bill Jones Road. And this is a variance from the minimum right-of-way for the Hamilton County subdivision regulations. In this case, has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? Mr. Price? Oh, there you go. We'll hear from staff first.
Sure. This is SD 2022-0033. This is a request for a variance to the minimum right-of-way standards of the Hamilton County subdivision regulations, which requires a 50-foot right-of-way. The request is to do a 40-foot right-of-way into Prairie Pass development. This is Phase 5, which provides or will serve as a secondary entrance to Prairie Pass development, which is well over 200-something lots. They need a secondary access point, which is what this access point will provide. Per the fire code, again, any development over 200 lots must have a secondary means of access. This is the proposed plat you see on the screen.
You start squeezing those down in a 40 feet. In some situations, it may be appropriate if you don't have that number of utilities.
Derek,
Yes, sir.
seems to me you could just, I mean, if all you're having to do is satisfy that requirement for two means of egress, this could just be a private drive built to city standards, and you don't need anything from us. And you could do that in 22 feet. And all you got to do is build the road and 26 feet. And I mean, it's private and it's privately maintained by the community. They use it as a normal means of ingress, egress. The fire department uses it, and you don't need a right of way.
I mean, if that's acceptable,
I'm not saying it's acceptable. I'm just saying I think you don't need right of way.
I think the preferred obviously would be to have a public right of way, but
You can still do it. There's nothing keeping you from just permitting paving a 26-foot wide road through there. You don't have to call it a right of way, do you?
County standards, and he keeps looking at me. I mean, there's two things going on. One is a subdivision regulation that it does not meet based on that. And then the second, I think to the chairman's point is a fire code, emergency access, dual access for 200 lots. And without looking at the subdivision regulations and knowing for sure whether this variance is appropriate, there may be some discussion about it potentially being private for just fire code. But
I thought
without looking at that,
I thought I had seen other cases where, like in particular, we've got these multifamily developments where you've got a couple hundred, 300 units, and they're putting in knock gates and second means of egress for emergency ingress, egress without right of way.
Yeah, I don't know about those, but I know in this case, even if it is private, my understanding of the subregs, that would have to be a 50-foot right of way because it would serve more than 3 lots. The right of way is still the key issue, no matter if they do the 26 feet.
So
of
it's
pavement.
required to have right of way?
Yeah, because it's a private road that will be owned by them or the private property owners per se.
Something that I'm considering as we look at this case is the growth that we see in District 7 in the county. And obviously, I'm here as a representative of the city, but I know that's something that's often a point of conversation with on-county commission. And it appears to me that building to a best practice standard is in fact the more sustainable way to move forward with developing the county. And if this were in the city, that would certainly be something I'd be advocating for. So, if there are ways to make this a best practice standard for the county, I would recommend that we hold the applicant to that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, Derek, is this, which one is the main entrance? Is it?
this is just a back
This
entrance.
is
The
the
main
back.
entrance is off of East Brainerd Road for the development.
Okay, and you do plan on doing the full 26 wide
Yes, sir.
standard, which is appropriate for the normal 50-foot right of way.
Correct. We just don't have the right of way width.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. All right, I'd entertain another motion. Dan, did you want to say something?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I was just going to say, we could spend a little more time looking at this just to be certain that, because in terms of the future subdivision that's listed there, I think there are concerns that how this is used down the road. I mean, because this isn't could it become a back way to get over through this subdivision? Obviously staff has to follow and giving you a recommendation has to follow the code. It's within this body's. This is a variance to the subregs, which is something the planning commission has available to them. So I would say, if it's helpful, we can study it a little bit more, see if there's any other conversations about how to address this before y'all act on it, if that is an option.
I think that's a good, can we defer variances
We can.
on subdivision? That's appropriate.
You can.
Okay.
You also have some plat on the next agenda item that will have.
Well, we'll defer that one. So 30 days, Dan, is that appropriate?
That would be acceptable.
Okay. I make a motion to defer 30 days.
Second.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And the next case is the subdivision plat, the preliminary plat, and that's SD 2022-0033, and that's approved with conditions and needs to be deferred for 30 days.
I move to defer 30 days.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0044, and this is final plat for Waterside subdivision and a reinstatement of Elam Lane right-of-way. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Matthews recused himself. Next, first item under old business, item 1 is case 2022-0166. And this is located at 7646 Paget Lane. And it's an application to rezone from A1 to R1. And staff is recommended to deny the applicant's request. Is there any opposition present? I see your hands and all of them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive email in opposition to this as well.
Yeah. Is the applicant present? All right. Mr. Schultz, can you give us the staff report on this?
Sure.
please?
This was before the Planning Commission back in July. And at that time, the case was actually asking for deferral by the applicant for 60 days. So it's back in front of you today. This is a request to rezone from A1 agricultural district to R1 for a single family detached dwelling subdivision. It's roughly 44 acres in size. Site plan is not required for R1, but they did provide one. They're showing potential of 157 lots. That's a density of 3.55. Have a zoning map on the screen. You see everything to the north, south, east, and west of this property is A1. The closest R1 is roughly a couple thousand feet away to the southwest. But in this general vicinity, there is no R1. It's 1,500, again, the closest R1 is 1,500 feet to the southwest. This is an aerial view of the site. You can see right on the map, it's all single family detached dwellings. You have some vacant farmland, but to the east is vacant land, to the south is single family, and to the west is single family. Here's a view looking into the site along Paget Lane. Another view we'll talk about in a second what these roads are, but this is a view of the site as well. This is an aerial view that's provided by the applicant. The area in green is the area requested to be rezoned. This little blue 2 lines here, that is the only public access to this development. It does abut up to what's Nestling Trail, which is a private road. So this lot doesn't have public road frontage. It crosses a private easement, which is Nestling Trail. This property is in the Wolf River Creek Area Plan, which is adopted in 2007. That plan recommends low intensity residential, which is typically residential dwelling units of less than 3 dwelling units per acre. This is a 3.55. The proposed R1 district would introduce a different form with much higher density with reduced setbacks into the area, which does not meet the intent of the Wolf River Creek Area Plan, which is low intensity development of 3 dwelling units per acre. The site does not currently have public access or sewer. However, WWTA has approved a capacity in this location for 300 homes spaced out over a 3-year period. So in theory, they can do 100 homes per year on sewer. Again, this site does not affront or have access to a public road. The request is incompatible with Wolf River Creek Area Plan and surrounding development forms. Staff recommended to deny. Here's a closer view of the site. And you can see this running along this road right here, which is Nestling Trail. That prevents this site from having public access. So public access will have to be worked out to this property. As right now, it's not shown. It's clear that that could be had. Here's a closer view of what that looks like. You can see Nestling Trail basically comes in and stops, and then you have this private road then onto the side.
Commissioner
And
Highlander.
here's a picture of the site or a proposed layout that was included. They clearly indicate on the site plan that they'll have to extend a public road across that private easement or get access to it somehow.
Thank you. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. We need 2 accesses with that because of the 199 units already in the subdivision to add to it.
If the fire code says 200 units, if it's over 200 units, you have to have a secondary means of access.
Right. Well, with the 153 they have in the existing 99, I believe it's already in that prior subdivision, be using the same access. So we would have to have 2 accesses, correct?
I'll defer to Todd. I would think so. I mean, I don't know how the existing subdivision comes into play. If it all funnels out into one existing, if that fire code would kick in on that.
I don't want to speak for the fire marshal because that's under his jurisdiction, but I mean, there is a difference between a rezoning request and actually getting a permit to start construction. I know that the site has access but it's not 50-foot access on the out Pageant Lane onto Snow Hill. So there are some things relative that just because it's rezoned to R1 doesn't necessarily mean that they can put the amount of lots that they're proposing, I guess would be my simple answer. So
Yeah.
I have no idea what the fire marshals looked at relative to that, but that's additional to just whether this is an appropriate land use for.
I think the big issue from staff was the non-compatibility with having R1 zone setting at this location with reduced setbacks, smaller lots than you typically see in this area.
When asked by the community, I did reach out to the fire marshal, and he said it's a composite of the number of units together, as far as he was concerned. That's my understanding, at any rate. And on the Pageant Lane, do they have an access? I understood that Pageant Lane there's only a 20-foot access, and that's owned by someone else, but the Pagets had an easement they wanted to transfer, but that would not be acceptable with only 20 feet for a second egress, would it?
No, sir. They would have to meet the fire codes and 50-foot right of way like we just discussed a few minutes ago.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schultz, quick question for you. The comment in regards to sewer, was that a capacity comment, or
Yes.
was that there was no sewer?
At the present time, there's no sewer there, but they are extending
no sewer.
sewers.
Okay, in Pageant, there's no sewer in Pageant.
I think it's over to the west, maybe coming along Paget. They'll have to extend it. Then WWTA gave them the ability to have 300.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure where the actual sewer lines are coming in out here.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff? We'll hear from the applicant first.
Yeah, Frank Goodwin, G&G Developers, 1133 Carriage Park Drive, Chattanooga, Tennessee. At this point right now, as we're looking at this particular case, given a lot of different nuances on this whole thing, we just want to see if we can withdraw until we get better information on how we're going to, handle it.
Mr. Schultz, they can't withdraw without us approving it being withdrawn.
That's correct, because it was deferred 2 months ago. You all, as planning commission, have to take action to accept the withdrawal.
Okay.
Or is action, you could either send it on the approval or denial, however planning commission sees fit.
I'm sorry, what was he?
Before a case shows up on our agenda, an applicant can withdraw it. Once you've been on the agenda, then planning commission has to make the decision on whether or not you can withdraw. So I was just getting clarification
Okay,
on that. So my understanding is that you want to withdraw the case
correct.
altogether. All right, thank you. We do have a number of you that are here in opposition. Can one of you come up to the mic? I just want to make sure you understand what the applicant has requested. The applicant has said that they don't want to have this case heard. They don't want a rezoning. They just want to withdraw their application.
Is that permanent?
It is permanent in regards to this case. There's nothing keeping them from reapplying. They could certainly reapply next week, and you would all have to come back here all over again. But and I know that I saw a number of hands go up, and but it is the reality is that you folks have come together. You've said you're in opposition. Your county commissioner knows you're in opposition. The applicant wants to withdraw the case.
Okay. Just one comment from us. I represent about 110 homes, and we want to go on record that we are not opposed to the growth. We are welcoming people coming into our neighborhood. We just want it done responsibly and don't change the way we live out there with our A1. Putting in high density is really against what we're concerned about.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's the will of the commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I didn't hear if they had connected yet, so just make sure that they connect in the hallway for future communication.
Yeah.
I think that would be responsible for both of them.
That's a good point. I need a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw this case.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. Move to withdraw.
We have a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming down here. You're free to go, or you're welcome to stick around for the rest of our meeting if you'd like. Frank, you should definitely connect with these folks since they took time out of their day to come down here. It'd be worthwhile for you to talk to them before they leave. Councilman Ledford, can you make sure that door closes behind you? Can you close that door? All right, next case on our agenda is case 2022-0177, and this is located at 401 Central Avenue and 1048 East 48th Street. This is an application to rezone from R4 to UGC and has a staff recommendation to approve the applicant's request with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Are you familiar with the conditions that staff is? And do you have any questions or issues with them? Any comments? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve. I do need to clarify that that motion included the conditions. So we have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0191, and this is located at 3400 Cummings Road. And this case was deferred last month, right?
Yes, sir.
And it has a staff recommendation to deny the M1 manufacturing zone and approve an M4 outdoor industrial use zone. And if you'll remember, this case was all about whether or not they could operate a rock quarry there while they start to develop this site. And I think is Donna still here? Oh, there you are.
She is. And since last month, Mr. Chairman, we have gotten lots of opposition to this case, primarily coming from Black Creek. I think you have in your Google sheet in front of you with opposition. There's noise, as you might expect, from a quarry at this location.
Okay. And so over the last 30 days, was any progress made outside of the fact that the public became more aware of it?
I will say, since last time on the screen, this is the actual request highlighted in the red that you see there. Since last month, the applicant, knowing they have to move forward with the M4, has since expanded that request, which you see on the screen now. It's enlarged from sort of darker purple to include the darker purple and the lighter purple. We did reach out to LDO, or Development Review and Permitting, for codes enforcement, since they enforce the zoning code. It's still their opinion, because the rock is being crushed on site and being sold at the site. M4 zoning is the best zone for this. Yes, you can clear the site for land disturbing permits and take the rock and move it somewhere else, but you cannot sell it on the site. It becomes a rock quarry.
So let me just clarify. If I have a steel building on a site and I want to demo that building and I sell the steel, does that mean I'm manufacturing or recycling steel?
I'll defer to codes enforcement if they're here. I don't know.
Oh, they are?
I don't know if they're here or not.
Oh, because that's the same condition in many ways.
But we've been told multiple times to Development Review and Permitting that the M4 is the only zone that allows that. No crushing is allowed in M1.
Okay.
And here was, and I think Donna, the applicant, has provided, since our last meeting, provided 3 conditions. And I'll show those on the screen, what her conditions are proposed for the site.
That's helpful. Thank you. Ms. Shepherd.
So very quickly, why we expanded the boundary, because you might be wondering that. When we submitted the original application, we thought that we could do this operation under M1. So this is a split zone site. Half of it's M1, half of it's M2. So we had only asked for the M2 area. Since we got a ruling from the Land Development Office that we had to have the M4 zone, that's why we increased the area. There is a lot of opposition. It is outside. The opposition is beyond the notification zone of the M4. And so we don't have anybody close by that's in opposition for that. You can see the conditions here. If it were not for selling the rock, we could blast, we could crush, we could truck, we could do everything out there. It's because they're going to sell it. And so I'll keep this brief. I spoke with Councilman Henderson, who's very aware of the case. We'd like to move this out of Planning Commission so that we can work with the opposition and get some mutually agreeable conditions for the site. So I request to move forward with the conditions that I have before you.
Question, please. Yes, Commissioner Highlander.
Brian, could you help me? She is correct that they can't crush as long as they don't sell. It's my understanding that some of the community members reached out to me and said that they were concerned with the crushing and they didn't think that was allowed. I just want to get a ruling from you on that.
Well, it comes from codes enforcement. I did reach out to codes enforcement, and my understanding, I have the email here, let me find it. There was no crushing allowed at all in M1.
But you can crush under a land disturbance permit. I mean, that's done. I mean, I really wish codes enforcement were here, since the case is all about codes enforcement. And the applicant has been here twice, and staff, of course, has reviewed this multiple times. But under a traditional land disturbance permit, the applicant's right. You can blast, you can crush, you can sell steel, you can do all the operations they're talking about doing under a normal. They just happen to have triggered some sort of nuance here.
This is the email dated Thursday, August 18th, at 12:47 from codes enforcement, Randy Ridge. No crushing is allowed in M1 regardless of what the permitted use is. So.
But
Yeah,
the applicant's point is that under a land disturbance permit, you can't crush. I mean, we see crushers all in R1 when they're busting up concrete. 700 block, there was a crusher sitting there for 7 months, and that wasn't zoned M1. And then over on William Street, where all that work was done behind Chattanooga Christian School, there was a crusher sitting there for a year and a half, grinding up foundations. We've put crushers on our projects before, and all over the county, they're blasting and crushing rock. And this applicant gets hit with this. So it just
I
really
want to add one more thing.
struggling with the interpretation here.
This site is already permitted as a borrow site. I've got a city and a TDEC land disturbance permit. And Commissioner or Chairman, you are correct on projects. If we were breaking up rock, crushing it to use on site, we're allowed to do that under a land disturbance permit. If you look in the M4 zone, it says it is not intended for temporary uses. So this is a temporary quarry. The intent is to get it to a manufacturing site. It's already zoned manufacturing, so that it can be developed. But if not for that, we were going to crush for sale. There's a lot of TDOT projects coming up, and this has really close proximity to the interstate. There's a lot of manufacturing sites that are being used for residential now. We've got a client that has looked at 6 different sites for manufacturing site, and they're having trouble finding one. This is already manufacturing zone, and everything around it's already manufactured.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, you may want to ask the applicant if why the need to rezone it. It's zoned M2. If it's going to be warehousing that's permitted in that zone, you would not need to zone.
Her only reason for asking for the rezoning is so that they can do what everybody else in Chattanooga and Hamilton County is doing when they're dealing with rock. So they're asking for a rezoning so that they can do the same thing. I don't. It's an odd situation, but can we go back to the conditions and just look at those real quick? All right. Any other questions for the applicant? We've got a number of people here in opposition.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you. Well, condition number 2, just to point out that the nuance of condition number 2 is that the applicant is requesting that they be permitted to quarry and crush the rock only down to an elevation of 665 feet. And so that to me, I mean, we're not looking at a pit. We're looking at, my understanding is flattening this land so that a manufacturing facility would be put on it, right? So not a quarry in perpetuity the way that we have another quarry in Lookout Valley like this. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Hill's point, I did reach out to Randy Ridge, Codes Enforcement, to make sure this condition as written was enforceable. He agrees it's enforceable, all three conditions.
And for the record, just one other thing, we sell dirt off our site all the time. That doesn't mean we're manufacturing. I mean, so if it were dirt and they were selling dirt, it wouldn't trigger any of this. Or lumber is sold off the site, steel sold off the site. I mean, this is not an unusual set of circumstances. And here we're desperately needing manufacturing real estate, and it's already got the zoning, and the applicants wanting to get it done and running into these problems. I'd be interested in hearing from the opposition. If y'all would like to speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Todd Birchfield. I'm from Covenant Transport. Our property is adjacent to the proposed site on two sides. We oppose the rezoning. We were able to get what we needed to get done on our properties under the M2 zoning. And so that's our stance, as we oppose the rezoning to the proposals.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Sims with LaBella Associates. Address is 1426 Williams. We've been retained on the behalf of Black Creek in opposition to this case, specifically the M4 portion of this case and the conditions proposed by the applicant that would adversely affect the Black Creek community. This site could be a quarry, could also be a concrete plant, an asphalt plant under an M4 zoning. If the applicant excavates to the elevation of 665, we're looking at 7.6 million cubic yards of materials that will be removed, not including bulk factors. The quarry will be able to operate 7 days a week, starting daily at 7 a.m. Weekends, holidays, everything. We have requested plans and surveys from the applicant and have been told none have been prepared. We have also offered revised conditions to the applicant and have not received any response. The conditions proposed by the applicant would be difficult for neighbors to enforce. Would the city require a quarterly topo survey to ensure the property owner has not exceeded this elevation? Who would the neighbors be able to contact on Sunday morning at 6 a.m. if the operator was operating outside of their condition? The thing is, zoning is indefinite, regardless if the property is sold or the market changes. The impacts of this rezone could impact neighbors daily for years or decades to come. Therefore, we kindly ask you deny this application.
Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for the opposition. You had mentioned that y'all would propose some conditions as well.
We have.
Y'all have those with you?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody else want to speak besides? Okay, can you come on up? How much time is remaining? Okay, you've got plenty of time. Thank you.
My name is Julia Whitaker. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Black Creek, and I serve as the Vice President of the Community Association's Board of Directors. My address is 4700 Cummings Cove Road, Chattanooga, Tennessee, 37419. Could I ask the Black Creek residents who are here today in opposition to please raise their hand? In addition to these residents, I represent nearly 600 homes in the Black Creek community and want to share the concerns that our leadership and residents have against the proposed zoning change. Under this zoning change, a quarry is a long-term commitment, and the blasting and frequency of the blasting adjacent to our community will be difficult to regulate. The proposed conditions include hours of operation for blasting 7 days a week. It's work days, school days, weekends, and Sunday mornings. As a result of the pandemic, many daily activities have gone virtual, and many of our residents work remotely. They take online classes or they enjoy church services virtually from their home. Unregulated blasting would have the potential to interrupt any of those activities for our community. If our homeowners' daily activities are disturbed, the community association is sure to receive complaints. But who do we reach out to, or who do we have them contact? Who at the city is responsible for helping to enforce the proposed conditions? How is the applicant held accountable? Additionally, unregulated blasting will have other negative impacts to the daily quality of life for the homeowners in our community. We expect that they'll experience increased noise pollution and poor air quality. We expect the truck traffic, both inbound and outbound, will increase, and there'll be impacts to local roadways, especially at the intersection of Cummings Road and Alabama Highway. This is the main intersection between 3400 Cummings Road and the entry to Black Creek. The accident history of this intersection is already under review to determine if improvements are needed for increased safety, and additional truck traffic certainly presents additional challenges. The additional blasting poses potential risks to the homes in our community. The close proximity of a quarry and associated truck traffic could negatively impact our homeowners' property values and make our community less desirable. Ultimately, a quarry removes the opportunity for compatible and desirable land uses adjacent to our residential community. Finally, the longevity of the blastings and the truck traffic impacts are ultimately unknown. This zoning change is asking our community to assume the risk of outcomes that can't be entirely quantified today without a clear system of implementing any kind of proposed regulation. So for these reasons, we request that the Planning Commission recommend against the proposed zoning change. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Can you pause the, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just asking for clarification's sake. I've done this really incredible tour of the top of the mountain. Did any blasting take place when that work was done?
We did some blasting internally, yes.
How was that regulated? I mean, I just don't, I'm just asking how.
So the blasting is under our land disturbance permit, which is for residential development. I think what's conveyed over and over again here today is that we're not against this property being developed. There are no plans for it, and we're against a quarry. We're against a long-term quarry. If they want to propose warehousing or something that fits M1, they can go do the same blasting and rock crushing that was done at Black Creek. It just does not appear that those intentions are the intentions of the applicant.
Understood. Thank you. Councilwoman Hill.
So residential blasting, is that quieter than this blasting would be?
We had very select blasting on the mountain. It was only used when necessary. It's not quieter, but similar to the agreements we have currently with the adjacent quarry that is already adjacent to Black Creek. They only blast 6 to 8 times a year. We warn our residents. We let them know ahead of time. It is not excessive. It's not going to happen at 7 a.m. on Sundays as they're getting ready for church. There's a large difference in just blasting under an LDP for something else and blasting for the next 30 years under a quarry permit.
Commissioner Howard.
Oh, wait.
I'm sorry.
So what I notice is that Black Creek is here and there's land, and then there's an interstate that is 2 lanes in either direction with on-ramps, which feels like a great distance. And then there is M2. We've got trucking. Help me understand how that far away, taking land down to a specific number of feet, will readily impact the quality of life and property value of something land, interstate, off ramp, land. Help me understand why that's going to impact your value or your quality of life.
I think blasting on Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. is not somewhere that I would want to live. If I heard that daily or weekly, that's, I don't think many of our residents want to wake up at 7:30 in the morning and hear blasting. I think Julia mentioned very clearly, a lot of these impacts aren't quite clear at this time. As far as going down to 665 at this point, that's over 200 feet of elevation change. That's a significant number of trucks, over 500,000 trucks if you don't include bulking factors. If you include bulking factors of 1.5 for rock excavation, you're looking at over 1 million trucks. Tell me when that ends. I think the longevity of this is the concern.
Thank you.
Commissioner Highlander.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if the applicant has had an opportunity to review what we just got.
They were sent directly to the applicant.
Could we get a comment, Chairman?
Well, maybe, but I'd like to make sure we hear the rest of the opposition if we could, and then I think we can ask. Yep. Does anybody else wish to speak? You've got 4 minutes remaining for opposition.
Hey, I'm Heather Degatano here with Reflection Writing. Arboretum and Nature Center. I have Robert Mingus and Kirby Yost, who are our board members. Kirby's actually our board secretary. And we're here also to oppose the change, the request. We've got sort of 4 main reasons why. First is that, actually, if you don't know where Reflection Writing is, we're across the creek from this. So just across Lookout Creek. So very, very close. The driving takes a little longer directly across the creek. 400 Garden Road, 37419. So we think that this proposed change would disrupt the peaceful enjoyment of our 300 acres, which all abut Lookout Creek, in addition to national parkland, again, directly across the creek from this site. We're worried about the water resources, both Lookout Creek and Black Creek, which come together. The confluence of it is right there at the railroad tracks, just off from Reflection Writing. We're working on a region-wide cleanup effort for Black Creek and the watershed, actually, from Georgia into Tennessee, which has been funded both by Rotary and Tennessee American Water this fall. So we've got some big plans there. This use as a quarry will make that much, much more difficult to do. And federal compliance with the streams that are already listed as 303D under the Clean Water Act also becomes more of an issue if this change takes place. While no one's suggesting that at this moment there would be a permanent quarry there, as I think the change would allow that to happen. That's what the applicant wanted to do in the future. Are we doing speak to the environmental side too?
Just to supplement what Heather said, I'm Kirby Yost, like she said, I'm on the board of Reflection Writing. On the environmental side, because there's not immediate development that's proposed, we're not sure what regulatory process would happen. You know, that would, for example, if a residential development was going in, there would be TDEC would inevitably get involved right away, et cetera. So we're not sure if those steps would occur without initial proposed development. So again, these are questions. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe adding an additional condition related to environmental, waterway, et cetera, review might be something that should be considered.
Thank you. And then Mayor Kelly.
I'm new at this. Does staff have anything to say about possible environmental impact? Is there concern? I mean, the Lookout Creek's on the other side of the railroad, right, where you guys are. I'm certainly not a geological engineer.
So I mean, I think for a use like this, once it's in place, I guess there would be some state requirements that they would have to meet. But I mean, any kind of development here, if it was residential, would have some type of impact. But obviously, just all the impervious surface you see around it on that slide, it's creating an impact just from what's there now. So I mean, absolutely, if it's an industrial site, it's going to have, even if it's quarried to where it's flat and then it becomes another industrial site, it's probably going to be largely covered with asphalt or a building. So again, there'll be, from any industrial site, there's going to be typical runoff from trucks and things like that, things that aren't captured. They will be captured in some kind of stormwater facility potentially, but still there's going to be impacts on the creek for sure. I mean, I wouldn't tell you there's not going to be, but they would be regulated by state agencies.
Once they pull, in order to do the work that they've described, they'd have to get a land disturbance permit from the city, and they'd have to get a land disturbance permit from the state, and the state would ensure that, they had temporary detention basins and water quality best management practices and those sorts of things. So there would be a degree of regulatory oversight for sure. All because it's not permitted for the construction of a building doesn't mean that it's not fully regulated by the state and the city. Any other comments from opposition? I think we've got a minute left. Yeah.
I just heard about this like last week, but I'm trying to do research on it, and on even finding this plat and which one it was very difficult. And then also to look around the whole of Hamilton County, I can't see our M4 sites. Do we have M4 sites anywhere else in the county? I heard something about a landfill up in Harrison. Is that an M4? It seems like most of them are M1, and then they code changed where you had 4 categories of M. And so some of them are just grandfathered as M1. And to get to M4 was a higher bar now. But I couldn't find any in the county that were. And the other part, as a resident there and a member of Real Reflection Riding, I'm not happy about that. Lookout Valley is a very unique part of this area in this county because it's surrounded by mountains. And there's very limited developable property, either manufacturing, retail, or homes. And that should be protected and should make the best use of it, not necessarily the worst use of it. So that's my concern.
Thank you. Mrs. Shepherd, you've heard some of these questions. I think you've probably got answers to.
Yes, I do.
So you've got a couple minutes to respond. We'd like to.
So the last gentleman that just spoke about the different M4 sites, he is correct. Vulcan over on Shalford Road is zoned M1. The quarry that is right next to Black Creek, they've got an existing quarry right next to them, is zoned M1. And so this has been a quandary on the zoning. To answer the question regarding that they have provided conditions to us and we have not responded to them, I have been in close contact with Councilman Henderson. No, I didn't directly respond to hers. We had sent our conditions out to them and I got a response from them on September the 1st. And that was right before a holiday weekend. We are willing and want to, and I've talked to Councilman Henderson about this, to sit down with them and come up with a plan. But it was too soon to Planning Commission to get all of that together. If it takes more than a month before we get to City Council, then we'll take the time that we need. To address the blasting, this is already permitted as a borrow site. We are going to blast. We are going to truck. If we can't do it on site, we're going to truck it off somewhere else. So you're going to have the same number of trucks. I think the resources for the city is better protected if we stay on site, crush on site, and deliver from out of there. So nothing changes. If you're doing a residential land disturbance project and you are going to blast, there are regulations that you have to follow with the state of Tennessee. We'll have to do blast certificates. The contractor is very experienced in this and notifications. I believe that what they told me is they're planning on shooting once every 3 months or so. They're not going to be doing this on Sunday morning. That would be reckless of anybody and irresponsible. Can I have a couple more minutes or maybe one more minute?
You can have another minute.
As far as the hours of operation, I can do everything anytime I want to right now. And I want to liken this. You hear the difference between an R1 zone and a PUD all the time. Basically, I can build the same number of houses as if I got a PUD. It's just, it allows me for flexibility of design. The impact is the same, whether I'm grounded this or not. It's probably worse because we're going to truck it off site and process it. We have to get rid of this rock to get to a developable site. And I don't like to say it that way, but that's the reality of it. It's like a PUD. I'm going to do this, and we want to work with them to come up with some conditions. But I want to do it between now and City Council. So I want to get this out of Planning Commission where I can work with my council representative.
Thank you, Mrs. Shepherd. Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Evan Shepherd, do you know who would regulate or who would enforce?
The state of Tennessee. The other thing about the elevation, I want to touch on that quickly. This site it's not going to be all 666. What we were trying to accomplish from last meeting to this one is to have some type of definable scope to limit the construction. The site isn't all just vertical where you're coming straight down. It undulates, and we're planning on two different pads that might be at different elevations. And we'll go through and we'll do the detailed work that we need to do if that's what it takes. But I don't have the time between when we met and we gave them conditions to get to planning commission.
Mr. Chairman, can staff clarify, because it was mentioned a minute ago about the M1 and M4 zones?
Yes.
Yes, those sites are correct. They're zoned M1 for the existing quarries, but my understanding, the M4 zone came about in 1998. Those two quarries are probably grandfathered in. There was a lawsuit, I believe, I think it was a lawsuit that the city had to draft the M4 zone, and this came about in 1998. So I think the two that was mentioned today are probably grandfathered in as the M1.
Sure. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chairman, one
Mr. Matthews.
question for Donna. There's going back and forth. Is this temporary or permanent? What's the time frame do you anticipate on obtaining your elevations?
That's where I'd like to spend a little bit more time. We were knocked up right against a holiday weekend, and I just did not have the time to do that. And so we will work on that. I can't give you a time frame right now, but we will have something before when we finally get to city council.
Thank you.
Mayor Kelly.
Again, being somewhat new at this, just to clarify, they can blast now in the current zone.
They can.
With
With the permits.
the Landstrom's. Okay.
Mr. Vernon.
More a question for staff. Did staff really receive this list of conditions, and do you have any comments on these?
No, we did not. We're not even writing comments on the three that you see on the screen.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Donna, I didn't hear you comment on the conditions. Maybe I missed something, but.
Well, I think we cut her short on time.
I didn't go through them because we are short on time.
Can we ask her to respond to those?
Go ahead.
So my first condition was to voluntarily knock out the noxious uses that you would find in an M4 zone. And I think they had added a couple, the cement and the concrete plants. I don't feel like those are noxious uses. They are kind of related to actually doing the operations that we're doing, especially for TDOT. M4, their condition number 2, they did put a time frame on that. They also listed M2 would be permitted only. The majority of my site is already zoned M1. I'm not requesting to down zone. I want to keep my M1 zone, so I don't agree with that. The hours of operation, they've listed everything. I can already do all of those now. And then imported stuff for aggregate and blended uses. Again, if I'm crushing rock, especially for a TDOT project, they might set up a batch plant temporarily. Once we get to our developable site and grade, we just want to develop the site and move on, get a land disturbance permit for it. Yes, some of this rock may be used on site for that development, but mainly the time frame and hours of operation and down zoning from an N1 to an M2 use, I just didn't have the time to address those specifically.
That's correct. And then staff recommended to deny the M1 and approve the M4.
Sorry, I got to cut you off. You're not allowed to be talking right now, so I'm sorry. Any other questions for staff? What do we want to do? Can somebody pull that door closed? Councilwoman Hill.
So the process of moving through a request such as this is that it comes to Planning Commission and we make a recommendation ultimately to the City Council or the County Commission. And we talked through this last month and then talking through it again this month. Donna has mentioned she's spoken with Councilman Henderson, who is really our primary way of moving this through determining conditions that are in the best interest of residents and helping another fellow resident landowner move forward with a goal of theirs. So given that, and the fact that Councilman Henderson being my colleague, he is very comfortable with moving this on to City Council so that those conversations can happen in a very meaningful way. I would like to motion that we approve the staff recommendation of the M4 outdoor industrial zone with the recommendations of conditions. In addition, I'd like to see those conditions from the applicant. I'd like to go ahead and add those conditions to my motion. So we would have 4 conditions, knowing then that Councilman Henderson, the applicant, and the residents of Lookout Valley can have a productive conversation and make sure that everybody's concerns are taken into account. Thank you, Chair.
It is a motion. We do have a motion and it has been properly seconded and it's got the 4 conditions that we've got here in front of us. Mr. Schultz, these from the applicant.
No, it's the 3 that's on the screen.
Plus the 4th.
Plus the 4th one would be here, the
Okay.
staff recommended.
Thank you.
These you have in front of you, I think, was some opposition.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a
Mr. Matthews.
question of confusion, I guess. How can you adopt both of these? Because they
No, we're
conflict.
not. It's
No,
just,
but you're saying both. You're saying the 3 and the 4. Right? Just the 4th. Just the 4th. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
What's the 4th condition?
no material to be imported to the site for aggregate blending of other things. Oh,
Okay.
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 Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, so clarify the motion.
All right.
I'd like to follow the staff recommendation with the approval of M4 outdoor industrial use zone, subject to the following condition. Quarry and all other industrial uses permitted in the M1 manufacturing zone, subject to specific requirements in Article 5, Section 38-301, 38, 302, 38, 303 uses only, along with the 3 conditions requested by the applicant.
Gotcha. Which
Is
are on the
that-
screen.
Which are on the screen. And is that, there's no conflict within those?
No,
Am
we're
I
good,
correct?
we're
As
good.
I've studied that? Okay, thank you.
Do have a motion with conditions.
Sorry
Thank you
about
for
that.
clarifying, and it has been seconded. Commissioner Highlander, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And I'm certain that Councilman Henderson will definitely take these and many other thoughts into account. Thank you for bringing them to us.
We will, Mr. Chairman, we'll also make sure code enforcement's at the council meeting.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, next case on our agenda. This case 2022-0195. And it's located at 5505 Brainerd Road. It's an application to rezone from C2 to UGC. And has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? Okay, thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Sure, this is case 2022-195, located on Brainerd Road. This is a request to rezone from C2 Convenience Commercial Zone to Urban General Commercial Zone for multifamily dwellings. It's 2 acres in size. Proposed number of units are 102. And it's a density of 49.27. You see on the screen, everything along Brainerd Road is currently zone C2. To the north of this side is R1, but to the south and east of this side, C2, and the west, you have a mixture of C2 and R1. This is currently being used as a hotel in the C2 zone. Multifamily is allowed in the C2 zone, but multifamily has a density restriction on that in that zone. It's roughly 18 dwelling units per acre, and very similar to R3 zone in terms of density limitations. But in C2 also, you can do unlimited number of hotel rooms. That's one of the oddities with our zoning code, the way it's written. There is no limit on the number of hotel rooms you can have, but there is a limit on the number of dwelling units. Therefore, they have to rezone to a zone that allows higher density. There is no C2. I mean, the site was rezoned C2 in 2006 by a zoning study. There is no UGC near this zone. If you look on the screen, on the zoning map, this property is was currently used as a hotel. It does abut single family to the north and to the west, but along Brainerd Road, it does abut commercial uses. Again, like I said earlier, the C2 zone allows hotels with no limit on the number of rooms, but multifamily does have a limitation. This property is highlighted in the red. The little flag lot stem that comes down, it does front Brainerd Road, so a portion of this property will be subject to the Brainerd overlay standards. Here's a view of the site. Again, it was a former hotel. This is the view of the site from Brainerd Road. The site's just beyond this green dump truck. Here's a view of the on the site, left-hand side. You can see the butts. This is Pisgah Avenue. You can see some of the residential. This is north of the site, some more residential uses. This is south of the site, looking at the site from Brainerd Road. The site's just in the back here in CVS Pharmacy to the west. And this is west of the site on Pisgah Avenue. Again, some more single family. And this is east of the site. Again, this is along Brainerd Road, which is commercial. There is no land use plan for this particular area, so we rely on the comp plan for some guidance. This is level 5, which is most appropriate for a higher intensity development. The comp plan ranges in levels from 1 to 5, with level 1 being the least intense, level 5 being the most intense. So this is level 5. The proposal is compatible with comp plan. It is compatible with adjacent commercial uses in the commercial development form. The UGC zone is compatible with Brainerd overlay design standards. Staff does recommend conditions limiting the building height and prohibiting high intense commercial uses to protect the single family dwelling or residential neighborhood to the north and west. So staff recommends to approve subject to 2 conditions: maximum building height of 2.5 stories or 35 feet. And then no auto-oriented uses, adult-oriented uses, wholesaling, accessory warehousing, and hospitals are prohibited. So staff recommends to approve with those 2 conditions. And we did receive an email in support, and it sounds like we have opposition today.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, we'll hear from the applicant first.
Andrew Leffler, Jim Squadron and Stoffel, for the applicant. This is Harry Patel, representative of the current owner who wants to form a project. I'll let you speak to the conversion and the going from a current Motel 6 to we see as a higher use and affordable housing.
Afternoon, everyone. So we had purchased this about 4 years ago. It was an independent hotel. We had spent about 2.5 million to bring it where it is today. We have several projects going on right now where we're converting hotels into studio apartments, which is for workforce housing, where we're seeing there's more of a use for that than just daily or weekly extended guest. So we just finished 2 projects in Rome, Georgia, a total of 300 units, and it's going very well. Keeps the 911 calls down, and there's background checks on every customer that comes in, and they've got to sign a 1-year lease. We use a professional management company that does background checks before they're allowed to stay there. They have to make 2 times more than the rent. Plus, like I explained, they have to do a background check to make sure. With the hotel, right now, you just pay a $50 deposit, show your ID, and get a room. There has been quite a few 911 calls here just because of the guests. So that's what we're trying to rezone it into something that's going to be more safer for this property. And there's a lot of extended stays that's there right now, but we're looking to move it up to the next level and put the long-term studio apartment style in each room. So there'll be a total of 102 units. Thank you.
And the plan is to keep the current building?
Yes,
right?
sir.
And you would just be converting units into, apartments, more or less.
So right now, it doesn't have a sprinkler system or a full-blown alarm system. That will be installed. And there'll be a kitchenette in every room to provide that.
Gotcha. And Mr. Schultz, this is just 100% driven by the density?
The density, yes. Like I say,
C2.
C2, you can do unlimited number of hotel rooms. When it comes to multifamily, there is a max density.
Mhm.
UGC doesn't have that. So they have 102 units, which exceeds based on the acres, it exceeds the density.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Highlander.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I may not be understanding this correctly, but will the number of units change from what is existing now? Is the hotel structure will be the same number of units?
Same amount of units,
Okay,
102.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you. For the applicant, first of all, I think this is a pretty interesting concept, and doing the math, just for my colleagues, you said we needed to, you're thinking workforce housing, and you need to be able to qualify, you've got to make double the rent. Doing that says to me we've got a $30,000 annual income, which is something we have a significant need for within the city of Chattanooga. So I thank you for bringing an idea like this to us. Something that occurs to me also, knowing then that the current building is going to stay the same, so we may not see the impact on the R1 that we might have expected were the building to change significantly. Tenant rights. So will these tenants have a long-term lease with you?
They have to have a minimum 1-year lease.
A 1-year lease.
And they have to only play monthly. Right now, the guests can play daily or weekly with no background checks.
Okay. And so that offers more transients for the neighborhood, also for the residents, but also a resident has very few rights as a tenant because they are in fact in a motel room. Versus if they have a 1-year lease, we have a workforce housing unit that also has some level of tenant right with regard to the expectations for you as a landlord, the expectations for them as a tenant, payment, that kind of thing. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? We'll hear from the opposition. If you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, coming up to the mic. If you could, please introduce yourself and also give us your address. I don't think I told people that earlier, but state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm R.C. Reeves. Some of you all may know me. I'm here representing myself and my parents. My parents are at 1314 Learning Lane, and I'm at 4305 Shawnee Circle. And so we have a couple of concerns. I did spend some time with the county last week, and I did speak to Mr. Patel over the phone last week. And so I'm gonna start here and then I'm gonna let Ezra kind of circle up the end piece. The first piece around this zoning deviation is I see that it would be precedent setting to our area. Right now, we do not currently have these type of developments of changing a hotel to multifamily. So I want to make sure that y'all are kind of cognizant of that before we kind of move forward. The next piece is I'm uncertain if the business case around it being for workforce housing is totally accurate. I've reached out to the city council, I've reached out to the county, and I'm not aware of any new jobs or new, job developments in our area that would warrant this particular housing. Right now, a lot of individuals are looking for housing, looking for jobs to go along with that housing. So I want to make sure that we're not starting this on the premise of potential jobs in the area that have not actually been presented. So we have a concern around that. The next piece that I really have some concern around, and he already mentioned about the 2-3 times your salary. Again, there's not a lot of jobs in this area that would warrant that. And if you think of the size of the footprint of a hotel room, you're talking about a small space. So when you say $1,000, $1,200 for a hotel room, which is typically around 400 or 500 square feet, they can let us know. Definitely. When I kind of put the pencil to it, you're kind of exasperating the rental cost again, because typically you're looking at maybe a duplex. It's a 2-bedroom with a living room and a kitchen. And that will usually go around that $1,000, $1,200. Now you got like a quarter of that. So I want to make sure that we're kind of cognizant and kind of running the numbers around that. And then lastly, just really concerns about that particular area. I know Ezra is going to speak to it as well, but it has been quite a nuisance. I did reach out to both my councilman, which is Councilman Hester, and I sent an email also including Councilwoman Burrs. I just want to make sure you kind of know the breakdown. Right there on that yellow in that curve where you're at Brainerd Road, the side where CVS is District 5, and then District 6 is across the street, literally. So I did include both of them in the email in regards to some of our concerns that I've mentioned here. Lastly, right now, as it sits, when I spoke to the county and they ran the numbers for the density, they can have 36 of these units. So they could take 36 of those hotel rooms and change them into these multifamily. The UGC allows them to have no density requirements and change all of them over. So I just feel like that's going to have a grave impact to residents that live right behind that area. So those are the major concerns that I have. I know Ezra is going to speak through some other ones, but I wanted to make sure that you all kind of understood more larger than just housing, what has been presented to us versus what we really are aware of to occur in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Ezra Harris, and I'm Vice Chairman of the North Brainerd Community Council, and we're concerned about the fact that what type of impact this will have on the surrounding neighborhoods. The impact that it will have on the golf course there that's around the corner from it, other neighbors there that are in the Brainerd Park area, and also other adjoining neighborhoods that are there. And as it is now, it's a nuisance. I went by there the other day. We went to look to see what was going on. You got a dog that's inside one of the hotel rooms in 114. What impact will this bring to the residents? Because before they renewed it, it was a nuisance then, but this is a different owner now. And of course, it still has a black eye, and we're concerned about it because some of the seniors in our area, they don't like to go to CVS pharmacy because of the nuisance that's there now. So we're just concerned what type of impact will this bring? Will it be a positive impact? If it does, it's okay. But if it's not, then it's not going to work for the residents, okay? Thank you.
Just one more note. When we say nuisance, there is a drug issue, a drug problem in that area, and it's high prostitution in that area. So when he mentioned the 911 calls, that's exactly what we're talking about. When I walk down the area, you can find needles, It's a lot of arguments. When he's mentioning the dogs, it's more than just that one dog in there. You know, people are bringing in different things into the area. So I just want to be very clear on what the nuisance is. It is around drugs and prostitution. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any questions for the opposition before we give the applicant an opportunity to respond? Y'all have a few minutes to respond to the comments that we've heard.
So for the nuisance, that's what we're trying to change it over. That's what I explained earlier. From a Motel 6, a guest can walk in with their ID and get a room. It's very simple. Once they have the room, we can control what comes in. We've done this in many counties, many states, all the way from Kentucky down to Florida. And the cities love it. 911s have cut out. It's just like renting an apartment complex. Yes, it's not a big unit, but it's workforce housing. You need to be at work, not in your apartment all day. Right now, the guests are in their room all day. We can't stop that. So that's why we plan on doing some. This is very new. Quite a few big companies are doing it. They're taking these hotels and converting it to something better. So that's why we have the whole background check. So there's going to be more control than just handing over a key and collecting a daily rent. It's got 100 rooms. Every day there's different guests. You do your best. We have security, but with this, there's no control in a hotel room, what they're doing in there. So once they rent a room, we can't go in there. Yes, we can enforce some stuff, but not much as a apartment where they have to fill out a whole survey. Are you working? What's your pay stubs, and get more control of the guest. We're not trying to fill it up overnight. It takes close to a year to get to full capacity. So we feel like there's a big need of this in Chattanooga. We've got other hotels too in Chattanooga, and we're moving to the same direction to turn these into studio apartments. We own the Chat Inn. That one's already zoned. We're starting on that in January to rezone. It's already rezoned. We're starting a renovation on that.
Commissioner Highlander.
Thank you, Chairman. I certainly appreciate the two people that came in opposition. I understand their concern about nuisance. I would think that workforce housing would cut down on the nuisance, I would think. Cut down, especially the drugs and the prostitution. I would hope for your sake, the community's sake, that this would be a better situation than what they've had in the past. It would seem as though it would.
Mayor Kelly.
Yeah, I just want to echo Commissioner Hollander and Councilwoman Hill's comments as well. I do think this is a step in the right direction, and I commend Mr. Patel for the vision and look forward to it. I understand the resident concerns, and as always, I think the city will keep a very close eye on it, make sure it's moving in the right direction. But all the evidence that we have studied at the city would indicate that this is absolutely the right direction to go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Kelly, do you want to make a motion?
Move to approve with conditions.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll go on to city council. I would just encourage both of you to, it'll be at city council in a month, and talk to both of those council people and make sure they've heard your concerns as well. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is 2022-0197. It's located at 107 South Germantown Road. It's an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? All right. And is the applicant present? Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think the planning commission has seen this site several times on this piece of property. So we're back at this property again at Germantown Road. It's case 2022-197. Request is rezone from R1 residential zone to RTZ. The applicant did provide two conditions. The proposed use is 2 single-family residential dwellings. It's 0.66 acres in size, proposing 2 units. That's a density of 3. Just looking at the zoning map, it's all surrounded by R1. If you go further north, you do run into R3 closer to Brainerd Road. Sorry, went on the screen went out of here. There we go. Back to it. Here's, yeah, I went the wrong direction. The screen went out down here. Try to make you sick.
All right.
So we were back. So this is zoned R1. Again, you have R2 to the south, one parcel to the south. In this general vicinity, it's all R1. There is no RTZ in this general area. Again, the applicant did propose 2 conditions, 2 single-family residential lots only. Each lot should have a minimum area of 7,500 square foot. Again, there's no history on this piece of property, but there has been history nearby. Rezoning from R3 in 2003. 1981, there was a zoning study that rezoned from R2 to R3 for some property. But this general vicinity, there has been no zoning history. To the north of Audubon Drive, almost near Brainerd Road, you do have multifamily. But in this general area, it's all single-family detached dwellings. This is about 1,300 feet to the south of Brainerd Road, this property location. Here's the view of the site from Brainerd, from the Germantown Road. Another view of the site. Just like the last case, this case does not fall within the land use plan boundary area, so we rely on a comp plan for some guidance. Again, based on the intensity levels, 1 being the least intense to 5. This property is in the level 5 area, which is appropriate for a little bit higher density development. One of the things staff did note, proposed single-family detached dwellings are compatible with adjacent single-family residence in developmental form. Staff recommends conditions limiting the uses and minimum lot size to ensure compatibility with adjacent land uses and development form. So staff recommended to approve, subject to the following conditions, which took the applicant's condition and tweaked number 1. 2 single-family detached residential dwellings only. 1 single-family detached residential dwelling per lot. Townhouses and 0 lot line dwellings are prohibited, and each lot shall have a minimum lot size of 7,500 square foot. The previous requests have been multifamily or townhomes. Staff at that time felt that since there was no land use plan, we didn't have any guidance where this area should transition into more of attached housing. That's why staff recommended to deny those previous cases. But this being the case of 2 single-family dwellings, staff did recommend and felt RTZ was appropriate with those conditions.
Brian, can you help me understand why they need the rezoning to RTZ? Looking at that plat, that looks like that would.
It would not
Because the minimum lot
it
frontage.
meets the lot size, but not lot frontage. You have to have 60 foot of lot frontage. And I think total, both lots are around 70 foot in total. So
Okay.
number one, they can get a variance for the Board of Appeals. That's most likely going to be difficult because the hardship is not present.
I got you. Thank you. All right, we'll hear from the applicant first.
My name's Derek Blackwood, MAP Engineers. We're the engineer for the project. And as Mr. Schultz said, essentially this has come up before the Planning Commission twice before. First go around was recommended to approve by Planning Commission for 7 units, townhouse units. Second time was for 4. Both times we met opposition, so we withdrew it before City Council. And then this time we're essentially asking for an RTZ with R1 conditions. We're okay with the staff's conditions. We just don't have the frontage. And so we'd ask your consideration for approval.
Brian, one other question. This seems like a crazy question. I don't remember the answer. Can you only put one house in R1?
Yes.
Period.
Period.
Only ever.
Yep.
Okay.
ADU, you can do ADU. That's not a primary
Right.
building though.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's one thing the applicant did ask. If he does 2 single family detached dwellings, could he have the ability to do ADU the way the conditions worded? According to city attorney and codes enforcement, yes. They can do 2 single family dwellings and then as part of that ADU, but you can't subdivide it.
Yeah. Right.
So the ADU is an accessory to the primary unit.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Littlefield.
Opposition. I'm Ron Littlefield, 3420 Glendon Drive, a resident, property owner in Glendon Place for 51 years. Going back over 40 years, when my hair was darker and there was more of it, there was a move in the city to encourage density, and large swaths of the older city were zoned R2 for duplexes. We had some unfortunate experience with that, in that when development took place on lots, frequently those lots were left for a reason. Those of you who are in the building community know that leftover lots frequently have some problems, specifically drainage, sometimes access, sometimes topography. And so when those lots were used, they rubbed up against the development that was already in place in those existing neighborhoods. So there was a move afoot, a grassroots effort, to rezone those areas that were zoned R2 back to R1. That started in Brainerd, started in our neighborhood, went to Belvoir, other parts of Brainerd, North Chattanooga, St. Elmo, Fort Wood, Furter Place, and other communities that had an old traditional single-family development pattern. And as a result of that, those communities that were zoned back to R1, and specifically those neighborhoods, such as Fort Wood and St. Elmo and Furter Place, that went a step further and got historic zoning, became stabilized. A lot of the divided units were then put back into single-family configuration, and property values increased. So the lesson was that before you allow vacant lots in a settled neighborhood to achieve greater density, you have to consider certain things. And stormwater was one of those things that we didn't consider back 40 plus years ago. But we got complaints from people when those old unused lots were used about water that was spilling over on their neighbors and such. And of course, we've been dealing a lot with that over recent years. The other was accessibility. If you have denser neighborhoods, you need sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks in a lot of the older city. We certainly don't have bikeways, things that we are becoming more familiar with nowadays. And also there's the more nebulous and interesting part having to do with consistency with design in the context of the neighborhood. And that's what you see us dealing with in neighborhoods like St. Elmo. Well, the developer proposing this told a small group of us that he built $1 million homes and he had 50 plus units of rental housing. We were encouraged by that, and we asked him to give us some examples, and he never did. So that is a little bit of a red flag as far as we're concerned, but not necessarily a fatal red flag. We just really want to know what we're dealing with here. The fact is that the recently adopted provision for accessory dwelling units would allow two essentially single-family lots, two single-family developments on this particular lot without any change in zoning, without any change in the subdivision itself. One thing we know from dealing with stormwater is putting an artificial line across a drainage way doesn't stop the water. We already have a drainage problem with this property. Is Marco here? Marco couldn't be here. Fellow next door to this property already is dealing with a serious drainage problem, and it can't all be coming from his property. It's coming from the property that's proposed here for rezoning. So in order to deal properly with this, we would suggest that, first of all, the use of RTZ in order to just basically skirt the provisions that are already in place for an R1 neighborhood is a misuse of that zone. It is almost a classic spot zone. And a contorted subdivision plat, as has been proposed, will not solve the drainage problem. So we suggest that the rezoning be denied and that the subsequent subdivision plat also be denied. Now, we have others here that are more effective than I am lined up here to speak, people who are adjacent to this property. We have other people in the audience here. Would you raise your hands? We're from the Glendon Place neighborhood, and we've been here before, and we will be back if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Frank Meyer. My wife and I live at 102 just a drive in Glendon Place. Our property backs up to this proposed development. What attracted me to Glendon Place, of course, was the historic beauty of the area and the community. The home's dating back 100 years. As Mr. Littlefield mentioned, he's been a 50-plus year resident. It's really a historic gem for Brainerd. And such as Fort Wood and St. Elmo, we're looking possibly to make it a historical district in the coming years. I grew up in St. Elmo, know all about spot zoning. Look what St. Elmo's become. It's a beautiful place. You can't get a house in St. Elmo under $350,000 now. It's a beautiful place to live. Belvoir Avenue between Brainerd Road is a prime example of continuing R1 zoning. I know those residents are looking for that too. And Hilltop, they're looking for the same thing. This across the street is the Hilltop area, and it's all single family dwelling, as you heard. I'll give you a quick timeline, but one of the other things I want to mention is Mr. Mayor Kelly's article on August the 8th about spot zoning. He has a similar situation, I know, with a larger development right there in Fort Wood. But to give you the timeline, on February the 14th, the initial request from R1 to RT1, they recommended denial, as you heard. Then we had a city council meeting on March the 8th. We flooded the place with these residents, 30 plus residents. Also have a petition with 69 residents who oppose anything but R1.
I just want to make sure you know there's only about a minute and a half remaining.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I know there's a gentleman behind you that wants to speak as well. And I would appreciate it if maybe you could hand that petition to Mr. Maybe here. We'd like to see that. And then make sure this gentleman has an opportunity to speak.
I will mention one more item. We did meet with Mr. Price and them at their office. Ms. Coonrod was actually there also. And we talked about this to talk about the townhomes. Again, as Mr. Littlefield mentioned, at this point, we just want to keep it R1. With ADU, we're open to that. We think that would work, but shoehorning two houses in there with ADUs, we don't think is going to work. So.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Green. I represent my wife, Liz, and I. We're the closest residents of this property. We met with this gentleman back in April, and he's changed his mind so many times on this property. We kind of questioned his intentions, and he wants these to be rental units. These are established single-family homes here, and the rental people coming in and going usually degrades over time, devaluates your area and your property. His attention to the property has been none at all so far since he's purchased it. We have to cut his grass for him, keep his kudzu cut back, 330 feet of kudzu cut off of us, and he never addresses any of the situations around there. So we question his intentions for the rezoning and respectfully request it's kept R1 and everybody in our community on single family homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Derek.
So again, essentially, we came to this commission requesting townhomes initially, the first two times. After meeting with some of the residents, changed our request to single family. And given the size of the lot, it's 2/3 of an acre. We feel that this is an appropriate use. We just can't do that within the R1, given the lot frontage restrictions. With this layout, you are pushing units further back off the road and splitting them up so they'll be further away from property owners than a traditional, lot frontage along South Germantown. So again, we'd appreciate your consideration for approval.
Thank you, Mayor Kelly.
Just a clarifying question. I was just looking at the petition. Was this petition signed in opposition to townhomes, the previous zoning request?
Yes, sir. It's stated that they want to keep it R1.
Okay.
So I
Just-
haven't had time to go back and have a petition.
I was just clarifying. Okay, thank you.
All right, we had the opportunity to hear from the applicant, staff, and the opposition. We have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. What's the will of the commission?
I'd like to motion to deny.
Second. We have a motion to deny, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, can we get some further clarification why the deny or intents behind the deny? So to help write that in the resolution, what the thinking was on the deny.
Well, I mean, I didn't make the motion, but I think we heard loud and clear from the community that they live in an R1 neighborhood and want to maintain R1 on their lots inside that neighborhood. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, properties like that, you just. All right, next case on the agenda is item 4 was withdrawn. Item 5 is 2022-0199, which means that's the 99th case that we've had for rezoning this year. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. It's located at 6026 East Brainerd Road, and it's an application to rezone from R1 to RT1 and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And we have some conditions here that staff has recommended. Are you familiar with that? Install a 6-foot wooden opaque fence along the property line. We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, item 6 on the agenda is case 2022-0202. And it's lots 1 through 15, 115 through 165. And it's for an institutional plan unit development amendment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? Second. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0204, located at 1117 East 14th Street. It's an application to rezone from R3 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And staff has recommended these conditions. Are you familiar with those? Okay. Number 3 is no more than 3 townhome units connected in one mass building. You're taking issue with that condition, is that right? Okay. Mr. Schultz?
Sure. This is case 2022-204. This is a request to rezone from R3 residential zone to RTZ. Proposed use is single-family attached dwellings. As you can see on the screen, there are currently 2 lots. These are 2 lots of record. A combined acreage of both lots is 0.22 acres. The applicant's proposing 5 townhomes. That's a density of 22.7 on those 2 lots. Looking at the zoning map, go to the next slide here. There's been a lot of history in this area over the past year on zoning cases. As you can see on the screen, the ones in white are the cases you're hearing today, which is case 2022-204. 205 is to the west of this case. Go back to the east, you have 206 and 207. So this applicant has 4 cases in front of you today. Also highlighted on the screen are 2 cases in red, which is 2022-170 and 2022-171, which is to the northwest of the case in the circle. Those were approved by City Council, I guess, 2 weeks ago for UGC. And then highlighted in blue colors, you can see there's other UGCs to the south of Main Street that have been rezoned for UGC. These have been for mixed-use developments and larger scale townhome developments in the area. So there's a mixture of zones at this location. This is an aerial view just showing you what's present on the site. You have a mixture of uses from single-family detached along 14th to commercial, warehousing, and mixed use along East Main Street. This is a view of the site. Another view of the site. It's just to the right here. This is a view north of the site. You can see again north of the site on 13th Street, which is all single-family attached dwellings. This is the south of the site looking towards East Main Street. It's a warehousing facility. This is east of the site, which is single-family attached dwellings. West of the site is single-family attached dwellings. This property, as well as the other 3 we're going to talk about, are in our most recent land use plan, which is the historic River to Ridge plan, which is adopted in 2020. The plan recommendation or place type is urban residential. And the primary uses in this classification is single-family detached ADUs and 2 to 4 units per lot. It does allow secondary uses such as multifamily buildings between 5 to 12 residential units per lot. But the primary use in this classification is single-family detached. Going back to the map I just showed a couple minutes ago, with recent zoning cases in this area, we've now had several zoning cases utilizing the Area 3 plan and the place types for several months now. And the units per lot range has been difficult for staff to rely on for guidance in terms of density numbers. So RPA is going to be relying more on plan guidance to determine approach to meet the intent of the urban residential description, which is other descriptions in the place type. For consistency, RPA will use this place type description to recommend that building, massing, and setbacks should be compatible with existing traditional neighborhood development pattern and the existing residents. Therefore, while there may be a mention of density between 3 units versus 4 units for proposed townhomes, staff is recommending the RTZ zone as it has a minimum lot size and front setbacks that reflect a more traditional urban residential setback with conditions that limit massing and require parking to be the side of the rear. In the place type designation of urban residential, these are some of the descriptors. Lots are generally 50-foot wide, but with lot patterns can change within each block. Also a descriptor, parking is located at the rear and access from an alley or located on the street. Although the urban residential place type does not specifically suggest townhouses as a form, it does state that a range of housing types are included, from single family to small to moderate scale multifamily. The RTZ zone with conditions is an appropriate zone to meet the plan goals and ensure compatibility with the residential area. That's the key, is ensure compatibility with the existing residential area. If we need to go back to the screen, I will. This is just showing you what the current lot sizes are in RTZ versus UGC. In RTZ, you do have minimum lot size, you have minimum lot width, and minimum setbacks. You do have a density range. Typically, for single family, it's 14.5, and for townhomes, the density is 25. But when you go to UGC, there is no minimum lot size, there is no minimum lot width. You have a 0 front setback. There is no maximum density. You can also go up to 5 stories in height. So in order to promote a more urban residential form and ensure compliance with the Area 3 plan, staff recommends a condition requiring parking be located at the rear of the property. Just a reminder, this is 2 lots of record that could be developed with 2 single-family dwellings or a duplex. So in order to increase the density of zoning of this property is required. Staff recommends to approve RTZ subject to 3 conditions. Parking and access shall be located at the rear of the property. Single-family detached residential, 0 lot line and townhouse uses only, and no more than 3 townhouse units connected in 1 mass building. The applicant was proposing 5. Staff believes that based on the land use plan, 3 in 1 mass building is more appropriate at this location because of the adjacent dwellings on the other side of this property, which are single family detached. And here's a site plan that was submitted with this request to introduce 5 townhomes at this location. So staff recommends approve RTZ with 3 conditions.
Mr. Schultz, in regards to your comment, I think I heard it correctly in that in order to increase density, a rezoning is required.
Yes, if you'll talk about density right now, it's 2 lots of record. You can do 2 single family dwellings.
But it's zoned R3.
It's zoned R3.
So, I mean, under the R3 zone, he could put all 5 of those townhomes. If he
Lot
just
size,
dropped the lot line.
maximum density, lot size, the R3 has 7,500 square foot for each lot plus 2,000
For each
additional
lot,
unit.
but if you didn't subdivide
Each unit, sorry, each unit.
each unit,
Yes. It's 7,500 for the first unit and then 2,000 for each additional unit above that first one. This is a 0.22 acre lot. I believe he can only get
Okay.
1 unit.
with R3.
Yeah, R3. And based on it being 2 lots of record, he can do 2 single family dwellings. By rezoning to RTZ, if you want to talk about number of units, it goes from 2 to 3 basically. Or you can do a duplex. We'll have the same discussions on the next 3 or 4 cases.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And the reason again for limiting him to 3 buildings was
To make it more compatible with the land use plan recommendation and more compatible with adjacent dwellings on either side of this property.
okay.
Again, we're going back to what the land use plan recommendation or it did have guidance on massings. So that's where we're pulling this stuff from.
Okay. Thank you. Josh.
My name is Josh Barr, and I'm the owner and developer of this property. Address is 2120 Dayton Boulevard, Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I'm against the only 3, and I'm proposing 5. I'm willing and open to compromise, at least to be able to do 4 townhomes on this property versus 3. And a couple reasons. This neighborhood's extremely unique and diverse, has a lot of UGC zone, has a lot of M1, 0 setbacks, and then of course has a little bit of mixed residential in it as well. And the property directly to the right of me on the corner is also a duplex. And so I think, proposing 5 and staff recommending 3, I'm open to compromising and doing at least 4.
Any questions for the applicant? I think I asked earlier, is there any opposition present? All right. How wide are they?
So at 5, they'd be 16 wide, and at 4, they'd be 20 feet wide.
townhomes. It just makes bigger units.
Exactly. Yeah. So
And-
with 3, now I'm gonna have to build even bigger square foot, which is gonna result in a much higher price point.
Yeah, I think it's just helpful for planning commission and staff and everybody to kind of understand how you make those decisions. If we say you're limited to 3, how wide will your buildings be? Your townhomes?
They would be,
You don't have to tell us exactly.
35 feet
Okay.
wide.
And how much would they sell for if you were to sell them?
Well, that's one of the biggest issues and why I'm proposing more density, because that allows the units to be smaller, which as a result allows to be a lower price point. And so in this zip code in particular, it's extremely desirable. And, to make the numbers work, if I can only do 3, it's going to have to be north of 500,000 for these townhomes versus if I can do 4 or 5 now, it allows it to be in the 3 to 350 range.
So I understood staff's comment in regards to limiting the number of units was about building mass. And what we're hearing from the applicant is whether it's 3 units or 5 units, it's the same mass. It's just 5 front doors with 5 owners or 3 front doors with 3 owners. Just, that's what we're hearing. I understand why staff made the recommendation they did, but I don't know that it has the impact that maybe staff thought that it might have. So with that,
Any other staff has any?
I'm just pointing out what we're hearing so that it's registering with everybody.
Yeah.
That we're hearing staff had concerns about the number of units because of building mass. The applicant's saying,
Right.
I'm going to build the same size building either way. One's just going to be bigger and more expensive.
Well,
I can,
Go ahead.
I think that we found the UGC with an unlimited amount of density, particularly when we have single family homes already on the street, was not compatible. The units per lot after using the plan is not compatible. So we did a site visit and spent a lot of time trying to figure out what a solution could be based on the public vision identified in the plan. And you're right, we are thinking 3 would reduce the massing, allow the RTZ allows the setback, kind of a open space between the existing homes and this. So yes, I think that we would want to adapt and figure out if it's not the RTZ zone with limiting massing, what else needs to be done to make these more compatible? Because otherwise it's really allowing a full build out of the lot. And we looked at density. I think the staff reports pointed out a range of surrounding densities of like 6 dwelling units to 13 dwelling units an acre. And we're getting proposals of 22, 30, 40 units an acre. So we're trying to find a solution based on the adopted policy. And what we came up with, it sounds like you're right, is not, if the massing of the 3-story building could be the same as the 5 unit building, we need to come up with something else, it sounds like.
I mean, I'm happy to hear from other planning commissioners. I share their concern in regards to the building mass, where you have, single family detached houses on a street, and then it switches to a building that is probably almost 80 feet wide and 35 feet tall. That just changes the character of the neighborhood, and the intent behind the Area 3 plan was that be maintained as much as possible while increasing density. And so I can see their concern and hear that, but I'm not sure that
Mr. Chairman,
really gets us there. Mr. Matthews.
I have a question for staff. He's on his sketch. I know it's just a sketch, but he's showing it's the 5-foot side setback. I thought it was a 10 on RTZ to what's the adjacent zoning?
It's adjacent zone is R3.
Oh, it's
We changed
R3.
that.
Oh, it's R3.
It's R3. That was changed, I guess, last year to have 6-foot side setbacks.
Okay. Well,
But this site plan is probably based on UGC though.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Is with the proposed zoning RTZ, is the front yard setback 15 feet?
It's the average on either side. If there's not a structure,
So
you go
it'd be-
max 15.
Okay, so it'd be the same as what the other houses are set back.
Correct. UGC has a minimum of
Right.
0, so
Right.
you can push them up to the street.
Right.
And that's what staff's trying to get as the form, make the form more compatible with those
Right.
conditions.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Maybe.
kind of to add on to your question there, what are, on the R3, what are the side yard setbacks on that?
I believe it's 6 as well.
It's 6 feet. So potentially what he's showing, and I think he's got 5 feet on each side, but if we went to 6, that would put him in line with what the rest of the houses are there.
Yeah, and then again, the UGC doesn't have it's a 0 front setback. The RTZ does have a max of 50 or minimum of 15, or it's average. But in this case, I think there's one home on one side, not a home on the other side, so you do the 15-foot front setbacks. And then also the UGC you can do 5 stories if you will.
Right, but in this case, the applicant's not asking for UGC on this particular application.
In this case, he's not, but the
Right.
next case he will.
Gotcha.
So in this case, he would be limited on his building height. Is that correct?
To
Yes.
35 feet.
To 35 feet, which is the same as what they could do in R3.
Yeah, and the applicant in this case did request an RTZ. He wanted 5 versus staff saying 3 in one mass building.
Mr. Chairman, I see where the staff wants to look at building mass in terms of how it relates and fits into the neighborhood. And I think that is something we do need to consider as we start getting into these residential neighborhoods or traditional R1 neighborhoods. But I think in this case, the way it's laid out with the conditions, other than limiting it to 3, it will be a building mass that fits into the current neighborhood. So I would make a motion to approve with conditions except number 3.
We have a motion. And it has been seconded to approve with conditions 1 and 2 from the staff recommendation. And it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Josh, don't go anywhere. Thank you, Mayor Kelly, for being here. Next case is case 2022-0205, and this is located at 1027 and 1029 East 14th Street. And it's an application to rezone from R3 to UGC. And staff is recommended to deny the UGC and approve RTZ. And add some conditions, which are the same conditions as we just saw. And I guess the question for Josh is, do you take any issue with any of these conditions?
Yeah, so this one, I'm requesting a UGC zone. I recently picked up another lot on this corner lot to allow a lot more density on this property. And so with the UGC and with it being a corner lot, you can see directly across the street. And this neighborhood is not your typical Chattanooga, neighborhood. Is extremely unique and has a lot of different zonings, but a lot of M1, a lot of UGC already in this neighborhood. And UGC was recently passed on some other properties that I had right nearby this one that I'm requesting for. And so with this corner lot and with the alleyway, it allows for a very unique and great site plan to fit high density, which allows smaller unit sizes and still, fit the overall scheme of the residential in the neighborhood. And so that's why the UGC is the best zone for this corner property, which consists of 3 lots. And you can see the site plan below. There's one single family house to the left of it, and then some vacant lots behind it. And then, as you can see, a lot of UGC on that same street in this neighborhood. And so I think it's right in line and compatible with other UGC zoning in this neighborhood.
And you've suggested 2 conditions here, a max of 3 stories and one other that I lost.
Residential
Residential.
zone.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman, this is what we just talked about a few minutes ago, the density. Based on the number of units proposed and the lot size, this is a density of 41 units at this general location. Again, RTZ, we felt was more appropriate to plan with those conditions. That puts the density more in line at 8.8 dwelling units per acre instead of 41.
How big are the units you're building, proposed in UGC here?
So these will range from 1,100 to 1,350 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And ultimately this again comes down to a little more density allows to have a little more affordable price points and affordable and smaller size units.
Any opposition? Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess actually question for staff. There were several, or what appeared to be several UGC zone properties in the near area. Are those conditioned to keep them more in lines with the plan and the density that y'all are referencing? I guess what I'm asking is there a reason this one shouldn't be UGC when we have a bunch of them around?
Just from memory, those are less dense. These are to the south are much larger properties. So therefore the density is less. These over here were more of a mixed use, 4 or 5 units just from memory. These two, he was just referenced are an array. They were approved at city council 2 weeks ago, I guess 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure the number of units on those, but they were very small as well as compared to this one.
Are those residential developments?
And those conditions were residential only, Emily reminded me. So staff, again, we've struggled with this land use plan and we're trying to get more in line with the components of that plan. That's why we think RTZ is more fitting with the neighborhood than UGC at this location because of the setbacks restricting the height and the number of units are much less. It's more compatible with the adjacent neighborhoods. And RTZ was also amended 2 years ago and last year to be more of an urban type zone, which allows 4 units on one lot, if you will. It also has the urban type setbacks where UGC was meant to be primarily among the urban corridors and not there's a dislocation.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
I will just say that, no bones about it. I think if he can put 90 units on this piece of property and park it and, they're each 150 square feet and people want to live there, I think it should be approved. We're talking about a block and a half off Main Street, if not a block off Main Street. We're talking about an area where there's industrial uses right across the street. We've got no opposition here to all these rezoning requests. I don't think there's any opposition to them. And I don't think there's any better place for us to be pushing density, because I think if we are pushing density in areas like this, then we can feel really good about, when an applicant comes and they want to put, 2 lots in the middle of a established neighborhood in Brainerd, and we're saying no to that. We are saying no to housing somewhere. We need to also be saying yes to housing where, it doesn't have that kind of impact on an established neighborhood. So I, for one, would be in favor of this. I understand UGC was intended for the corridor, but it is the zoning option that we have that allows for a much higher density residential zoning.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say, I think we tend to agree with you. I think, where we're sort of arguing for different zoning is just because honestly, it's hard to figure out on these different blocks where he's requested different types of orientations, what totally fits. And again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I would recommend anybody that comes in here with a project like this, have a site plan that's actually this is okay. This is better than some of them we've seen, but I say also bring some renderings, bring some examples of a product like this. It would just help. I know people worry that we're going to condition it to that. That's a totally different issue. I'm just saying in terms of just presenting your case, some renderings would help a little bit on this.
Mr. Maybe.
what were his proposed conditions again?
Residential uses only, and I believe max of story of 3 stories.
30.
Yeah, max 3 stories and residential uses only.
But if this is UGC, what, is there anything that would limit density at all? Or
There is no density in UGC, and also without that condition of 3 stories, you go up to 5 stories. And that's why we were suggesting RTZ, because it has, again, more traditional urban setbacks, height restrictions, and density numbers.
And I just add one kind of comment too as well, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like y'all are somewhat limited at this point in time on the zoning options and tools y'all have. And that's something that they're working on in our zoning code update. So I know y'all's hands are tied in a lot of these decisions y'all have to make. But I'll defer to the rest of the commission.
One other thought is that UGC does not dictate whether or not the alley is being used. And, he's proposed the 2 conditions. And so if you are going to make a motion to approve his zoning request with his 2 conditions, his site plan shows that he's taken advantage of the alley, which I think makes good sense and should be conditioned upon using the alley. And that's right, Josh?
Correct.
It looks like you're just widening, you're taking advantage of the alley and then adding another 10 feet for fire.
Correct.
I'm supposing, okay.
Jim.
Mr. Brown?
Just a quick clarification. So the applicant's looking for UGC with the 2 conditions that we saw. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
I would make that motion based on this discussion.
We have a motion and it has been seconded, and that's with those conditions. And I didn't catch, was it also conditioned that the alley be used?
Yes, let's please add that. Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Do you want to say something? I think you wanted to say something like 3 times. There you go. All right. Next case is case 2022-0206, located at 1200, 1202, 1204 East 13th Street. Did you buy all this stuff at auction?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very familiar with all these properties. Congratulations.
Thanks. I picked up a couple extra lots to
Yeah.
allow on this last corner piece. I picked up another lot to allow a little better site plan for it.
Gotcha. All right, so we have a staff recommendation to deny UGC and approve RTZ, but I would like to talk through the specifics of that. Mr. Schultz.
It's the same comments as before. Again, this
different
density
site plan.
proposed is 26.4. He can do 3 single-family dwellings. It's lots of record. Or a duplex. That density is much lower than what's being proposed. Staff again recommends RTZ with 3 conditions. We feel the RTZ is the more appropriate zone based on the land use plan recommendations. And again, it was the most recent tool that was amended to allow urban type development.
Is there any opposition present? Do you have a site plan for this?
Yes.
I do. Show on the screen. Thirteenth Street's to the north, using, I believe, an alley as access as this as well.
Correct. Yeah, that's an existing 10-foot alley.
And then you're adding to it,
Yes, adding to it.
so it's 16 feet
Correct.
total. I'm gonna let you go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Questions for the applicant. How far away is this site from the previous case?
It's exactly 1 block.
You see on the screen, Chris, the one we're talking about now is highlighted in the yellow. Sort of the one we just talked about is about a block, 2 blocks to the west, right here. 2022 205.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my question. I'll make a motion after other people have had a chance.
Any other questions for the applicant? We've got no other questions. What's the will of the commission? We'd like to add that the ingress and egress be, the alley plus whatever's needed so that there's no new curb cuts on 13th Street or Olive Street. So we do have a motion with conditions, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And item 10 on our agenda, 2022-0207, located at 1128 East 13th Street, is an application to rezone from R3 to UGC as a staff recommendation to deny. This is just a single lot.
Correct.
And that's it.
Yes.
All right.
This one is a single lot. This is just to the west of the case we just heard. Same comments as I stated before. However, this one here, the density of 5 units is 62.5 dwelling units per acre. You can see on the screen here, it's a very tiny, small lot that sits right here. I'll show you the site plan. It's all abutting single family. We do have a big warehousing facility across the street. This little park was the case we just talked about and was approved by Planning Commission. This site's to the right. Here's the alley that accesses that site. The site's just the right-hand side.
Do you have a site plan?
I'm going to it here. Let's see. Here's the site plan. 13th to the north, Olive Street's to the east here. 5 units with alley access. These are 16 foot wide by 21 foot deep. That's why staff recommended to deny. We feel the current and best use is the current zoning that it has now for one single family dwelling. And by single family dwelling, you also do an ADU.
Josh, I feel like we've gotten to know you pretty well here in the last couple of minutes, and this seems a little bit.
I'm open to doing 4 or 3. Five might be pushing it, but I mean, it still definitely works. But 3 or 4 units.
Well, there's a required side yard setback to that. Oh, no, you're fronting, you're saying, I got the site. It's mirrored, right? So you're setting those right up on the street, right?
Correct.
And then you've got that 10 feet behind it.
What's on the I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, I just, I mean, I thought I developed with this. I mean, I thought like I was pushing the envelope. I've never seen something quite this dense.
I'm not sure if it's the actual north side of the property, but it's the top of the design here where he's showing the landscape. What's behind that?
To the north of the site is this big warehouse facility. To the south is single family dwellings. And this is the west of the site, which is all single family. And then this east of the site, that's again what we just was rezoned from RTZ for townhomes. UGC. And then another single family dwelling to the south. Yeah, it's one lot of record. You can do a single family dwelling and ADU on this site as presently zoned. Just a reminder, the density proposed at this on this site plan be 62.5 units. That's why staff recommend again to deny.
How tall is that building? That's proposed that we're looking at here. How tall is that? That's 3 stories tall.
Ideally would like to be 3 stories.
Any questions for the applicant?
And the applicant on this one had 3 proposed conditions. The other ones had 2. Residential uses only, max of 3 stories, max of 5 townhomes for the site.
I'm not a professional developer. This seems tight. And as I think about this area of town that has not had as many residents in it. We do have some single family, but it obviously has room for a lot more people. It is the job of this body to have some vision about where we're headed. And this site plan makes me nervous. I don't know how you fix it, but that's not my job. But this makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Josh, it's very clear from the comments that this is not getting approved today. So, I mean, I don't see anybody shaking their head. So, I know that we would like to see properties like this, which are not serving a purpose, which are in the urban core and on bus lines and much needed for housing and hopefully affordable housing. I'd like to give you the opportunity to come back to this body and not be prohibited from doing so for 9 months on this property, which is what a denial in this case would do, if I'm correct.
At city council.
At city council. They are not going to see this any better than we do. What I'd like to do is know what our options are. Can we defer this and he's talking about going down to 3 or 4. I'm not comfortable voting on that if I haven't seen a site plan that shows what that looks like. So can we defer this so the applicant can come back with an amended site plan? And is that something you would be willing to do?
May I add that if he does UGC, there is a parking requirement in UGC, and there are off-site parking requirements. And so I know that I don't know the parking requirement off the top of my head, but it's definitely more than 1 parking spot per unit. And so, I mean, theoretically, the zoning code, UGC is going to limit this to a lower density because currently he's only parking 4 off street.
Knowing that he's got so many properties in proximity to one another, is there an opportunity to create a PUD for all of this that would allow for
It's
the?
already done. No, you've already zoned them.
Okay, because they're already gone to UGC.
I mean,
I'm just thinking, like, as we think about the off-site parking and that kind of thing, if this was a master planned community. But okay.
Absolutely. And again, I'll just say, you know, I feel like I tell people I've walked through every new urbanist development in the South. I've probably walked through a community like this, but I couldn't really tell you because this, honestly, we're calling this a site plan. It's a sketch, and I would say with some good renderings and some good examples, it might be a really great project. So again, I think the deferral is a great idea. And I mean, if he wants to come back with something else, I'm
guess
surprised on the parking too.
My reaction to this was I think the same as everybody else's, but the reality is we're building and selling successfully a 16 by 20 foot wide unit all day long. We built them all over the North Shore. You know, we introduced a product at $205,000 into a market where there was only $450,000 houses at the time. Today they resell for $245,000, $250,000, and they're on my street. They're 16 by 20. That's what this is. It's a 3-story product. You know, I mean,
some of them are 1 bedrooms on it.
They're 1 bedrooms. I think we all have this kind of natural reaction to seeing density, but the reality is he's not obligated to sell these for any particular price. But as a developer is going to want to sell them for as little as they can sell them for, still make money and sell them as quickly as possible. So this is not going to be a $400,000 unit. It's going to be a $245,000 or $250,000 unit. There's none of that available in 37408, and that's where he's building this, right? Or is it 37404?
37408.
I think while our initial reaction may be the same at City Council, the reality is that the UGC zone is going to limit the number of units that can go there if he has to park them off site.
And to your point, I mean, I applaud his creativity. But
we need more of that.
I was going to say, you know, we're working on the zoning ordinance in the city, and our intention is to try to make it possible to do more creative stuff. I'll just say that.
And on the parking for townhomes, it's 1 space for 1 bedroom and 2 spaces for 2 to 3 bedroom units. But you also get some reductions if you're on transit line, et cetera. Again,
But he won't, the market's not, he's not gonna be able to sell a unit without a parking spot.
right, no,
You will not be able to sell these without a parking spot. Okay. Or rent them. So, I mean, the market's going to prevent the scenario.
No.
I'm hoping one day that'll not be true, but I think
Right.
that's true right now.
again, staff was looking at this more in terms of compatibility, not just density, because density sometimes can be misleading, I think. That's why we're looking at more, how do you make this compatible in terms of setback and height? That's why we, I think, speak for staff, felt RTZ zone was the most appropriate zone. Most other cases, this case, it was denied. The current zone was the best use of a single family dwelling.
I don't make motions, but I would make a motion to approve this. But I mean, I think this is an area, I mean, what's right across the street? Show us pictures of what's right across the street. That's compatible. I mean, if somebody's, I mean, this is going to be a 200, if it sells, that's going to be a $215,000 unit in 37408. And that's a great thing for Chattanooga. Go ahead.
So Josh, you know that you'll be bound by the constraints of the UGC zone in terms of parking and everything else like that. You acknowledge that?
Yes.
I'll move approval for the UGC rezoning, and good luck to you for how many you can get on there and get them past the building department. I'm not sure you're going to be able to get 5 with this parking, so you'll probably have to bring it down to 4. But I would encourage you to have another site plan ready before this gets to city council, just as another option. I anticipate not only the councilwoman for this district, but the rest of the council will want to see that, to see a site that, and I know a few council people who probably would want to see it when they got there. But again, to restate the motion, Chairman, I will move to approve the applicant version
With conditions.
with the conditions as stated in the report.
We have a motion
Second.
and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Also, you'll need to hire a structural engineer because that building will not stand up. So
Thank you.
it'll have a little steel in it. A lot of steel and a lot of concrete. Thank you, Josh. Good luck with your projects. They're much needed. We've got 3 mandatory government referrals here. And do we have any opposition to any of these
Mr.
items?
Chairman, number 13, which is case 2022-201, it's listed under government mandatory referrals, but it's not. It's a zoning case, but it's associated with a mandatory referral right above it.
Okay.
So that's why we grouped them together. It's a city case. I think we have received opposition emails for 201.
Okay. So in regards to item 11 on our agenda, mandatory referral 2022-0196 located at 455 Moccasin Bend Road.
Chairman, I move approval.
Do we have any opposition? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 12 on our agenda is mandatory referral 2022-0200, and it's located at 7725 Lee Highway. Is there any opposition? You're hearing opposition?
We have
We do have somebody here in opposition. You're here to present. Okay. Mr. Schultz.
Sure. Case MR 2022-200. This is 7725 Lee Highway. This is a mandatory referral to surplus public property. I guess last year the city acquired this through a mandatory referral and was approved and since purchased by the city. The city is now surplusing this property. It's 900 feet to the north of Bonnie Oaks Drive, as you can see on the screen. Adjacent uses are single family to the north, commercial to the south, and commercial to the east. Here's a view of the site. It's a former hotel. This is the view east of the site along Lee Highway. View north of the site along Lee Highway. Another view looking southward to Bonnie Oaks. This is the aerial view of the site. Again, it's a former hotel. This is in the Lee Highway plan, which was adopted in 2005, which recommends heavy business mix for this particular piece of property. Staff finds that the surplus of property does not negatively impact the health, safety, and welfare or well-being of the public, and staff recommends to approve the surplus. And Mr. Chairman, if you want me to go on the next case, this is the same piece of property, but it's rezoned from C2 to UGC. It's the same discussion that we had on Brainerd Road, where it's the number of units is restricted in C2 for residential dwellings, and therefore the need to go to UGC is the appropriate zone to get density up to match how many units are in that hotel.
Yeah, let's do that. So there's a mandatory referral to sell it, but as part of that, to rezone it as part of that sell. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, there's a case to surplus, and then if that
Right.
happens, then have another case to rezone it.
Right. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that since it's the same property. We'll do staff and then we'll hear from the, is that appropriate in your opinion?
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead
fine.
and do
They're
both?
together. That's why we
Okay.
group them together on the agenda.
Okay.
Case 2022-201. This is a request to rezone this particular piece of property at 7725 Lee Highway from C2 to UGC. Just looking at the map, the thing around this property is C2. To the north is M1, and to the northwest is R1 residential. There is no UGC in this general vicinity. Again, same land uses I just went over a minute ago. It's all commercial abutting this property. To the northwest, you do have single-family detached dwellings. Again, here's the other side. Again, it's a former hotel. I'll skip through these pictures for the sake of time. This is in the Shalford Road Lee Highway Plan, which was adopted in 2005. The plan recommends heavy business mix, which is typically C2 type zones or higher density type zones. Staff recommend to approve this request as it is compatible with Shalford Road Lee Highway Plan. It is compatible with surrounding land uses, and it is compatible with development form. Again, it's like we talked about in the case on Brainerd Road. This is all a density number because C2, again, you have an unlimited number of hotel rooms, but there is a max on residential dwellings. So staff recommends to approve the C2.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff? Okay. Ms. Hart, if you want to come forward, and I guess we'll sort of take, and I think you were in opposition, so you'll have some time to speak, but if you'll, I guess, give us your name and.
101 East 11th Street. And I brought in my resident expert, Sam Wolf, the Director of Homelessness and Supportive Services, and he can answer all of your questions.
Good afternoon. It was very serendipitous that Mr. Patel was already before this body explaining the concept. So again, we are looking to transform this property that was a lower end hotel that had a 2.6 on Google reviews, mostly citing the issues with the residents and the people that were staying in this property. And we're seeking to turn it into permanent supportive housing. We are seeking to rezone this property while we're surplusing it. The next steps would be for us to issue an RFP to contract with a developer to come and do this work. We're not planning on doing any addition to the footprint of the existing site. It's more renovating the properties, as Mr. Patel said, dropping in a kitchenette to make these in line with an efficiency apartment. This is a concept that is really taking root in communities across the country to meet the rising need for more affordable housing throughout our community. We can come in and do these conversions at a much quicker rate than if we did traditional construction on this property. We, as part of the RFP process, are anticipating doing a town hall style community engagement session once the RFP is issued, when we talk about the people that would be coming in and managing this location with people in the community. But we've already had some preliminary conversations with Silverdale Baptist School, the church and the school that's approximately 1.2 miles from the site.
Okay, are you done? Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. If you'll just, Mr. Maybe.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Is the city planning on maintaining control?
No, we would have it be maintained by a property management entity.
That would continue to be owned by the city?
No, we would confer ownership.
Okay, to a private?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen.
Are you sure? Have you checked the 1.2 miles? I mean, I'm in agreement with the concept that you have. I think it's a good concept, but I'm a pretty good estimate of distance. I would have thought it would have been much less than 1.2 miles to Silverdale. Have you checked that?
I think it's approximately 1 mile away. I can double check that, but that's just kind of something.
Okay, I guess it's a small point, but It seems like it's a good bit less than that, but I could be wrong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, sir, you're the opposition, I think, so you'll have some time if you want to come up and give your name and address. You'll have, I believe, 9 minutes total.
My name is Keith Morrison, 7720 Lee Highway, Chattanooga, Tennessee, 37421. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of White Lightning Harley-Davidson on that address. I attended the city council meeting where the purchase was approved. Had we known the property was for sale, we would have tried to purchase it ourselves, which I did make an offer to the city at the time if they would allow us to purchase instead of the city, that we would have done so. That area currently, once the city purchased the property, there's been nothing done to it. It is very overgrown. They did put a fence around it, excuse me, but we've had people living in tents on the property. We've reported that to the police because it's an eyesore for us as we come out of our drive. And we were told that it's not our property, that we have no say so over what goes on there. But we continually have hypodermic needles, prostitution in that area is seems to be pretty heavy at times, and people living in cardboard boxes, tents, things of that nature, in and around that area seems to be getting worse. Our opposition is that, and for me, I guess the question was, I was told at the city council meeting that they were going to use the permanent, or the structure that's currently on the property and renovate it. And through City Councilwoman Burrs, I've had conversation with her, email with her. She said that once that process takes place, that they would notify me and allow me to be on a subcommittee, I guess, to understand or to help develop the area that would be agreeable to the tenants or neighbors of the property. But I don't know if you guys have been inside of a Harley-Davidson dealer, excuse me, guys and gals, been inside of a Harley-Davidson dealership, but it's not, we sell a high-end product. We have a clothing department, we have a parts department, we have a service department, and we have a high-end clientele. And we just feel like that's going to become an eyesore, even more than what it is now in the future.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for? Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Hart, if you or if one of y'all would like to maybe at least comment, he had a few concerns about its current condition and maybe its future plan. If you could maybe.
Yeah, we received notification that the property, the kind of perimeter had been breached, and worked with law enforcement to secure the property when some folks kind of gained access to it, and are continuing to monitor it moving forward for any uses that are not or outside of our intent with the property currently. I think we recognize that there have been issues that this property and other locations nearby have kind of caused in terms of, the typical things you would associate with a low-end hotel. And it's really our intent to revitalize this property and to provide it the oversight that will come for it to being permanent housing for folks. And I think in regards to the opportunity for community engagement, that's what we're anticipating for the RFP process. And this is just the first step in us to begin that process to further engage the community and work with them to develop the uses for the site.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Holland.
Just one. Hey, Sam, real quick. The school and the church, so have they, I guess they've been involved in the process. What are their thoughts, or can you elaborate on your conversations with them?
We've heard, I think the primary concerns that we've heard so far, one that this gentleman said just in terms of the trajectory of the neighborhood, in the kind of the area, we feel that, coming in and renovating this property and turning it into something that is more permanent and has the facade work to kind of improve the the aesthetics of the property is something that could spur future development. And we've actually heard that there's been some developers that are looking at adjacent motel properties, possibly considering them turning them into permanent housing as well. And the other concern that we've heard from the school are issues around safety. And that's where something where through the RFP process, we select a high quality provider that will work with monitoring the site to make sure that services are rendered for people staying there and they can offset and address any potential safety concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Now,
Mr. Matthews.
I believe you've already answered this question, but the city will still maintain ownership.
No, we would confer ownership through the RFP process for an entity to own and operate the site for us.
So, okay, so you would sell the property to an entity of some sort.
Correct, through the RFP process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's why we have two cases on it. The first case is to surplus or sell the property, which is case 200, MR 200.
Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify as well, so it's during that RFP process that you'll be able to work with people in the area like the opposition here now and get their input on what the final product will be.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sir.
I look forward to the RFP process where a lot of those issues will be fleshed out. And I think that a lot of the property concerns will be alleviated once there's activity on the site. Naturally, that's what happens. So I would make a motion to approve case number MR 2022-200 because I believe that's the first one we have to approve. Is that right, Chairman?
Correct. That's the surplus. Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Chairman, I move approval on case 2022-201.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the rezoning from C2 to UGC has been properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to our amendments and resolutions. Item number 1 is a resolution to amend the Walden zoning ordinance to delete the VC Village Center zone and to incorporate a town center zone and town center overlay zone, add definitions, and to amend the C1 commercial zone.
Mr. Chairman, we have Keith Covington here today who will present on the town of Walden, but I have a couple slides I want to get to first. And in front of you, you do have 2 letters in opposition to the text amendments. I'm not sure if they are here. So you have 2 letters in opposition to the text amendments. I'm going to briefly hit, I'm not going to do the zoning code, but RPA did review this and go through those comments. So on August 9th, 2022, the town of Walden adopted resolution number 2022-565, requesting the Planning Commission to review proposed text amendments to the town of Walden zoning regulations. At the same time, the town of Walden's also gone through a new land use plan creation. And as part of that, they have a land use committee comprised of Walden citizens to guide the efforts of the land use plan in conjunction with the consultant team, which is led by Common Ground, Urban Design and Planning, which is Keith Covington over here on the right. As part of that, the land use committee recommended certain zoning changes to the town of Walden zoning ordinance. Again, these amendments include replacing the existing C1 zone with a revised C1 zone, deleting the existing village center zone and replacing it with a new town center zone and a town center overlay with design review standards. As part of our initial review, staff did note there was a couple items in the zoning text amendments that we needed to discuss or not. One of them was deviations. As you know, the past couple of months, we've removed deviations with the city of Chattanooga. Those deviations, whatever you call those, are variances that the Planning Commission has no authority on. Those are variances that basically should be approved with the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this text amendment stated that RPA would be approving deviations to any design of the town center. So we're recommending that be removed from the zoning text amendment. The second thing that was noted in the draft ordinance was a site plan / design review. Basically stated that site plans will be reviewed as part of any zoning request that's reviewed by the shall be reviewed by the RPA staff. We're not experts in site plan review or design review. RPA recommends that the town consider creating a design review board. That'd be more appropriate to review those site plans and for compliance with the zoning code. And here's the section, if we need to see that section, what it's referencing to, but staff recommends Town of Walden explore, again, setting up a design review board or some other alternative. Also, when I was going through it, I just noticed in the proposed town center zone, there's a difference in prohibited uses and special uses permitted. And permitted uses, there's a statement that in addition to the land uses permitted by right in the general commercial zone C1, then further down it says special uses permitted. In general, all stores, shops, or services similar in character, type, and effect to the uses permitted in the C1 zone unless controlled or provided by law. It seems like those two conflict. When I see those one comment is permitted by right, then the second one says it's by a special permit. So I'll turn it over to Keith, let him discuss. I think the two concerns the staff has is clearing up this language here and removing the process on deviations that go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and some discussions on who reviews site plans and building plan review.
Okay, and let me, before you start, Keith, are there some other people that want to speak? I know we got some opposition letters. So do we do this a little bit like a rezoning where we would do 7, 9, and 2? Or since this is a text amendment, is it a little bit different than
yes, it'd be the same. Keith does have a presentation. I'm pulling that up now. Let him go through the presentation.
Is it,
7
is
minutes.
it 7 minutes or less?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, great. Well, then
I'll make it fast.
And then if y'all want to be talking about who wants to speak, y'all will have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. My name's Keith Covington. I'm with Common Ground Urban Design and Planning, and I've been working with the town of Walden for well over a year. If you go, go back one there. Okay, so just wanted to give you a quick background on this. As you may recall, the commission recommended approval of the town of Walden's first plan in 20 years back in January of this year, and the town has started to automatically move forward to implement their vision. The plan was very comprehensive, but it had a focus on the Taft Highway corridor, and that's primarily what the zoning updates relate to today. The plan established a vision for the creation of a true town center for Walden. And Brian, you can go to the next slide. And then the town center itself had various characteristics, preservation of Walden's sensitive natural features, the promoting a mixture of uses or enabling a mixture of uses, promoting and enabling a mixture of housing types to increase housing choice in the community, an interconnected system of walkable streets and blocks, and actual usable open space for visitors and residents. And the plan recommended a series of changes to the zoning ordinance to allow for the implementation of that vision. And that's basically primarily what we're here to discuss today. So just to give you a quick overview of the updates, there's a tweak to the definitions that defines some new terms related to housing types to expand that definition a little bit. Stormwater management techniques that are recommended in the town center area. And then it also adds the town center zoning to the list. There's a revision to the residential zone R1. There is an opportunity in Walden zoning ordinance to allow for townhouses in R1 that meet certain criteria and go through a special use. And we want to expand the palette of building types or housing types there. So we, instead of just saying townhouses, we changed it to mixed housing types. And then later, in that 8.01 applications for special permit, it establishes some new standards for those housing types. And it really applies to the R1 properties in the Taft Highway focus area. It updates some of the dimensional standards. And of course, it adds design standards for site layout, buildings, and landscaping. And then we made some revisions to the general commercial zone. The C1, we added a pre-application conference with the town. Yes, we did have a site and building plan review. Walden is working on a creation of that design review board. So we accept staff's comments with regard to that. We did update some of the dimensional standards, established how the standards would be applied, because we obviously have, some of the C1 has existing buildings. So, whether it's new construction, additions, et cetera, we had design standards for site layout, buildings, and landscaping there too. We expanded our Article 6, our steep slopes and escarpment. It was pretty short, and we just wanted to expand upon that because of the sensitive natural features that we have in Walden. So we kind of broken the slopes into moderately steep and very steep slope areas, which really, prohibiting structures on those very steep slope areas is the key there. And then on the town center zoning at first, a little bit more on that one. So replacing VC1 with a new town center zoning, we felt that was the best way, just to basically start from scratch. So what we did is based on the plan, we established sub-districts, and you can see those in the next slide. So that's the image on the left is the gray illustrates what the town center area is, but you can see the different colors are two different sub-districts. One is more of a mixed use district, that's the red, and then the orange is more of a mixed housing district, but they're all intended to work together. Now, I think it's important to note that the way that this would be implemented is because most of the property on the west side of Taft Highway is either zoned agriculture or R1. There is a little bit of C1 to the south. The way that the town center zoning district would be applied there would be through a base zone district. So it would just basically replace that. Now, that's not what is at this meeting today. We're just asking to create the zone. We're not asking for a rezoning today. But on the west side, where we have some areas, there are more established uses and so forth. So we applied it as an overlay. That's what the land use committee decided on that. So next slide. Site plan and building plan review, same thing as before. Walden's working on creating a design review board for that. Next slide. We do address permitted land uses in the town center zone. And to Brian's point, I think some of that was a carryover from the older zoning ordinance, and we're happy to clarify that more if we need to. I think the reasoning behind that is if you look at Walden's land use list, it's got very specific uses, and I think that was just saying, okay, if it seems to fit what a C1 use would be, and it's just not in that list, then it can be approved. So I think if Walden eventually would go back and do a more simplified land use list, it might be able to do that. But we're willing to change that however we need to. And then the last couple of things here, we established very general design standards for the overall development layout, streets, to make sure we get interconnectivity, open space, lots and buildings, architecture, parking access, landscaping, and screening. And we do this with graphics and text. You can go to the next slide. So we have both tables and graphics that visually illustrate this. You can see the different types of there. And then next slide. And then we have very specific standards to the sub-districts. And also those, if you go to the next slide, are also for both graphic and text and are specific to those districts. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the presenter? Keith. Thank you, Keith. Hold on. Well, the questions are from us. I'm sorry. But if you want to speak as opposition and bring the question up, then that it can be answered when he rebuts, or it shouldn't be a rebuttal, when he responds. But if you would, I guess, line up here behind these other individuals. And Keith, if you would just stay close, and we're going to try to run this like typical rezoning, but ma'am, if you'll come up and state your name and address, and you'll have 9 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Kirby Yost from Chambliss Bonner and Stoffel. That letter that you all have is partially from me. It's also from Mark Litchford. And we were trying to present together for efficiency's sake. We have similar interests. I represent a developer under contract to buy a piece of property in this area. Mark represents the current owner/sellers. So our interests are aligned. And this letter has a whole lot more detail if you want to read through that. But our big picture concerns on the proposed zoning amendments are, and what we are asking for is really just taking more time to get this right. As you all know, zoning codes and laws are probably going to be in place a long time, and we're all operating under them for a long time. And I know this land use plan that Keith and team have worked on has been a long time in the process, but we don't want the law itself being adopted too hastily and not spending the same kind of time on that as we are with the land plan. Just as an example that sort of highlights that, this just got on the agenda last Thursday, and Brian and his team have gone through it and made some really good suggested edits. But what those edits leave, unfortunately at this point, is a lot of gaps, as Brian pointed out, because the RPA, said we can't do this task, we can't do that task. We suggest the town kind of work on an alternative plan, but as of today, the version that's in front of you, there's not alternative language proposed. So there are several provisions that are just missing, or sentences half done with blanks in them. And so that's one thing, just sort of a procedural gap on some of the issues. Second is some internal, what we see as inconsistencies, like the one that Brian mentioned. I hear Keith say they can work on suggested ways to handle that better. We think that the RPA and the professional on the consulting side should have time to kind of vet those things and think through them. And then third, and I guess some examples of those inconsistencies beyond what Brian suggested are, like in the new C1 zoning, there's also a statement that says no building footprint can be more than 5,000 square feet, period. So an all-out prohibition on size. But then the very next sentence says, for buildings that are proposed to be greater than 5,000 square feet, you should go through the special use permit. So just some inconsistencies that need to be vetted. And the language that Brian put up there about permitted uses by right versus special uses, that's in the C1 and the TC1. Just to note that in both places there are uses permitted by right, but then it says 100% of the time those uses require special use permit. That's inconsistent and problematic. And then just so that we have it all out there, from a substantive standpoint, we do have one other issue as well with the proposed text. As property owners, one or the other of us would be a property owner, we'll see. But there's a 15,000 square foot cap on any buildings in the proposed TC1 zone, which we think is problematic because there are some uses permitted by right, again, which in real life world can never operate in less than 15,000 square feet of space. So that's an inconsistency as well, and potentially, an effect on property values and property rights. Again, keeping this quick, I'm deferred to Mark now.
Members of the commission, thank you. Mark Litchford, Pearson Associates, 5726 Marlin Road. I do represent the property, one of the property owners in what would be proposed for the TC1. They're on the west side of Taft Road. The concern that really gave rise is the fact that this popped up on Thursday. This is a land use plan that has gone through serious considerations for several years now, but pops up with RPA and this body on last Thursday. The concern that we have identified was highlighted by RPA in the fact that there are several provisions in there which have been stricken. We've got the design review board, of which we even saw the petition up here that recognizes there needs to be a vetted portion of the design review board. That process, we believe, should take place with RPA. They're the professionals. This needs to be, at least at the minimum, deferred to allow RPA to work with the city to come up with exactly what that review board would look like, or at least to assist with the language. Additionally, you've got now this town village going to be split up into two districts. You've got the west side and you've got the east side. This is two new districts now that you've not seen. It will allow an opportunity for even the property owners in all of those sections. As it was stated, this is really primarily the Taft. I guess would be if you could allow for deferral. It doesn't impact the city. Mr. Anderson, you identified that they don't really get impacted if there's some denial or something like that. Let us defer it. Give us an opportunity to work with the city to see if something compatible can be done. And lastly is the 15,000 square feet cap. We don't see that in any other zone ordinance. You've got a cap, an arbitrary cap. Make it something that would allow the body that makes those decisions on Walden the ability to make actual discretionary rather than capped it at 15,000 arbitrary. That eliminates obviously a grocery store of any substance. It would eliminate a community center, eliminate even a potential church in that area. We would just suggest that given what we've seen from the professionals, RPA, what you heard today, a deferral would be appropriate to allow us an opportunity to clear up some of the issues, the inconsistencies, and then we can bring that back with more of a collaborative effort and something that has good consistencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, if you'd like to speak.
My name's Thomas Gallant. I live at 1326 Broward States Drive in Walden. And I just came down to hear about the ordinances and stuff today because I'm interested. I'm not with the lawyers and don't own any of that property. And I just like a little more time to read it before you guys approve it. And I wouldn't imagine y'all had a chance to look at it either. Anyway, that's the whole reason I'm here.
Thank you, sir. And ma'am, did you have a comment to make? I mean, not, and it can be a comment or a question, and then
This is a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lois Killebrew, Signal Mountain, and I agree totally with what Kirby stood here and related to you all. With the addition of, I'd like to have the document that we now live by and have lived by for a number of years to be cleaned up and amended. Other than that, I'm fine with what she said.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I want to kind of clarify something.
Sure.
On August 9th, Town of Walden did, through their Town of Walden Commission, they did adopt this resolution in front of me, 2022-565, requesting RPA do a review these text amendments. The applicant did get that to us by our deadline, which is August 15th. So it just didn't pop up on Thursday on the agenda. We've had it since August 15th. We've been reviewing it during that time period. So it met all the deadline submittals for this review today. We just finalized the agenda last week.
Okay, so that's just part of the process.
It's part of the process.
Let me ask you a question, just because I think it's brought up and it sort of. So the document we have is basically the document that was approved by the Walden Council, and then y'all have made the comments relative to that review, where I know you've struck some things about the design review and the deviations. Is that so? Yes. The markups, the strikeouts in here are RPA recommendations to the Planning Commission.
So what you have in front of you is I've received the information from Keith, what this land use committee is recommending in terms of changes. And then I took that, put it in the resolution format for the Planning Commission, and struck out the things
that you're recommending. Well, you struck out things that RPA does not do, or you're recommending as staff to us.
It's basically the deviation and the site plan review. It did not address the other issues that were mentioned here today. It was strictly those two.
Correct. I mean, because I saw some strikeouts there where it says the RPC and the town board. So I'm assuming when you strike RPC, if we recommend it, because all we're going to do is recommend, we're going to recommend it goes back to the town for final adoption, correct?
Yeah, this document, I don't believe, as written, came from Town of Walden itself, a town council.
It has not been adopted by the county council.
Okay.
It's
So then
from the land use committee and the consultant. It's a recommendation. We're reviewing the recommendation for a new code.
Okay.
Of which there's not been, from what I understand, any zoning applications made for that code. My recommendation, could be deferred or adopted today, but it is a recommendation of the city of Walden. And absolutely, we want the owners of the land and the city to get together and have agreement on specific provisions. But again, it's a recommendation that we're making. And the requests that are out there that folks are contemplating that they're going to make a zoning application or some development, again, that's kind of beyond our role today in terms of staff.
Okay, well, that's Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question on what y'all's review consisted of. So I noticed y'all struck out some things in terms of like the process of how the zoning process would work. But did y'all get into the technicalities of the zoning code and how y'all think those would fit in for that area?
No. The only reason I was doing, I was putting again together the language I received from the applicant into a resolution format. I call it the deviation because again, we just took the deviation stuff out of Chattanooga zoning code because the deviation as drafted was still coming to the planning commission. Then I saw the site plan review. I'm like, we're not experts in that. So that needs to be clarified.
But in
So that's
terms
why I
of,
struck those
in
out.
terms of how the zones are structured, y'all are not making a recommendation one way or the other, whether it's a good zone?
I'll defer to Dan.
I mean, we don't currently do design review for city of Chattanooga or anybody. I mean, so, I mean, it would be, if there was a design review board, it would be probably architects and folks outside of staff. You know, it would be a body that wasn't staff. In terms of the provisions of the zoning code, no, we didn't go through and say, should there be a mandatory size or like that on some kind of building? I mean, again, I think that's for some experts or someone in council and Walden to decide what's the right approach. No, we didn't get into any of that.
Okay, Keith, I think you've got 2 minutes.
minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. So
All right.
if you want to maybe respond to some of the comments
Yeah,
related.
lot to unpack there. Just back to your question a minute ago. RPA staff has reviewed this content. Karen Hunt gave us comments and we incorporated those comments. That was before it was finalized and formally submitted via the Walden's resolution, the town resolution. As far as you know, the timing on all of this has been a work in progress ever since the town board formally adopted the plan in February. And there have been several land use committee meetings that are advertised and open to the public where this is discussed. And I think Angela Cassidy is with us. She's with the land use committee. She could speak to, you know, specifically who's there, but there have been people at those meetings. We had a public meeting too about this where we presented this and laid it all out. So this is not something that's just coming in, you know, completely blind to this community or to this commission. As far as some of the specific things, you know, one, the question about the 5,000 square feet, that's actually left over from the C1 as it was, and I don't recall the date, but it was many years ago that the C1 had a cap of 5,000 square feet. But if you wanted to do something more than 5,000 square feet, you had to go through the special use permit process, which basically means you have to go and get approval from the town council. And then on the 5,000 to 15,000 square feet for the town center, that is not arbitrary. First of all, we're working with the sensitive environmental features of Walden in terms of we're trying to limit the amount of mass grading that happens with large footprint buildings. This was coming also from the community who recognized that, you know, they needed some dimensional flexibility. Which one more thing real quick. But also just the idea that 15,000 square feet, we chose that specifically because that was about the end range of like a pharmacy. And so that's why, but it could certainly be a smaller grocery store, but we chose that number specifically for those reasons. So sorry, I didn't get to everything, but.
Thank you. Well, I guess we'll. So let me make sure I understand. So the plan was approved in February that dictated some of these requests relative to size, new zone, deleting zones, recodified some of the zones, at least in the Taft Highway area. And then I guess I'm curious about the document that we have that has some strike throughs, because I'm assuming you're making a recommendation to us. If we're going to or recommend to the town and we take staff's comments very seriously. We would recommend based on some of the strikes. And if I remember, the strikes are mainly to deviations, which we don't do as a body, as a planning commission. Also the design review board, I don't believe you do any design review board approvals for anyone. And then there's a couple of, and I guess what caught me off guard a little bit was some of the strike throughs don't make sense. And I think this is some of the opposition's comments. But if we approve this with those strike throughs and comments from staff, we would basically send it back to the town and they would need to make a few little changes based on our recommendation from this body.
Correct. They'd have to amend.
And so that's one question that I think is important for the board. The other question would be, and I think this was brought up by maybe some of the opposition, y'all didn't really do, at least you took the plan review process relative to some of the 5,000 that maybe was done in, I think the date's 2017, the way I look, and the 15,000 square foot as a max. Y'all didn't review that. And I think to Mr. Maybe's question, you didn't review it, at least in this document. You took what had come through the planning process. And I'm just trying to make sure.
I did not. Sounds like Karen Hunt may have involved in
Well,
that. So
I'm assuming the 15,000 based on Keith's comment came out of that planning process.
That seems,
yes.
like,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean,
correct. Everything you said
I'm
is
just
correct.
trying to make sure
Everything you
because
said
there's
is
some,
correct. And,
I think there's some concerns about changing. And let me ask
and
one more.
again, it's the city's prerogative of that size thing.
Right.
And
Let me ask one more question so is this a zoning plan and it doesn't rezone anybody's property, or it does rezone individuals' property?
so by adopting this as a code provision, I would say it doesn't necessarily immediately until they associate it with these actual parcels of land. So it could be sitting on in their code, and then they've got to go through a process to actually zone land.
And that's sort of a town council question, not really an RPC question.
How
correct?
they do it, or do they do it?
Yeah,
at all?
well,
absolutely. It's totally accountable.
But we're not I guess my question, we went through a long process on the form-based code where we actually rezone people's property, and it was a long process in
And that's the
engagement with
process
those.
they intend to use.
So we're not so what we're adopting today is, or what we're recommending today is a review of what they've put together for a zoning change. We're not changing the individual private property owners'
That's correct.
properties or rezoning the property. Okay, thank you. Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To just further specify that point is, I'm sorry, Molly. Are there any properties currently zoned that these new zones affect? I guess what I'm saying, are there changes to existing zones that would have impact on property owners?
I believe there's, Keith, someone would tell me.
That may be better for the.
No, it's totally, from what I understand, we are just reviewing the code today. And specifically, if they wanted us to have a design review board for Walden, I would say make that a separate request. And obviously we can consider that. So, right now we don't have a Walden review board. So, I mean, putting it in a code is kind of premature.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to our task. For example, in our authority, do we have authority to defer this for, and it would go back to that review committee and then come back to us? Is that how that would work?
Yes, you could defer it. But I guess Keith, going back to his land use committee and come back with a cleaner version, wherever y'all want to recommend today.
Okay, to defer this though, does he have to request that, or we have the authority to?
No, I think we have the authority to defer it. I don't know if they're on a strict timeline, Keith. I'm sorry.
They would like to move forward. Yes.
I mean, because again, I think what the planning commission is being requested to do is it's almost a formality that they have to bring it through us, or that they've requested to bring it through us. The edits that we've directed, or that we've requested, the deviations and the other design review board issue, we're not going to, even if they kept that in there, I doubt we would ever voluntarily and without a whole lot more discussion, take action on any of those things. So, I mean, there's things in here that we don't like, but again, I think we're all just reviewing a code for the city. Again, I think it's, if we defer it and to get a little more clarity, I think that's probably fine. But again, they would prefer to move forward just because they're trying to get it wrapped up again.
Well, yeah, I'm concerned too because the previous question about is it I know it doesn't immediately rezone property, but it immediately eliminates some zoning. So what if they already have this zoning? Are they grandfathered in, or how does that work? So having said that, it does seem to me like there's some holes in this, and I'm not comfortable with it. And I would like to recommend at least a 30 to 60 day deferral. And I would make that motion 30 days.
Okay.
A 30-day deferral.
Have a motion and a second to defer 30 days. And
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Schultz,
can we clarify what, I guess, to help Keith, what during that 30-day time period, what is he supposed to be doing?
I think I was gonna say what I thought, but let Mr. Matthews say.
Well, as you can see, I mean, we've got some opposition. I think their issues need to be dealt with, and there's some holes there. Maybe that's positive or negative, but to me, that these little, even the things that you brought up need to be dealt with. So I think if it goes back to that committee, maybe they could get with them, and 30 days. That's my recommendation.
We actually have a motion and a second for 30 days. And I guess I was just going to reiterate, I know there's some strike throughs. I guess what we would like to see would be a clean document without strike throughs. Just to make sure that, just at a minimum, just to make sure that we've got a clean document that we can review and vote on. But we do have a motion and it has been seconded. Is any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Hollander.
I would hope that you would deal with these folks one-on-one and maybe sit down with them with your group and discuss the problems that they have as well.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye. Are there any opposed? Okay. Motion to defer 30 days.
Point of privilege here, I would like to recognize Vice Mayor East Ridge and my new commissioner cohort, Mike Chauncey, and appreciate his perseverance and being here with us all day today. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Commissioner, welcome. Thanks for being with us. We have last item on the agenda under amendments and resolutions is a resolution to adopt the West Side Evolves Land Use Plan. I'm assuming we have a presentation.
Try and pull up on the screen. The screen went out. Y'all have to see it in front of you?
Nope. We had one more item.
There we go.
Brian, you going?
Eric Myers, if you want to do a
Mr. Myers, great. Come on. Yes. Yep. Let's do it.
Sorry.
So are we, one thing, we have an action item on this. We actually are voting to approve this plan. To recommend it to city council. Thank you.
Right.
Oh, is there opposition to this plan? Okay, good.
Support for the plan left. They couldn't stick around.
Mr. Myers. Go ahead, sir.
So let me do a very abbreviated version of exactly what you're approving and how exciting it is for the West Side. Next slide. The West Side, as you may know, is bounded by ML King Boulevard, Riverside Drive, Main Street, and US 27 to the east. That's the district that we're talking about that was studied in this boundary. The partnership that was formed, next slide. Partnership that was formed to study this boundary was formed over 2 years ago between the Chattanooga Design Studio. That's who I'm with. I'm Eric Myers. I'm with the Chattanooga Design Studio, 850 Market Street. I should have read that into the minutes. At the Housing Authority, of course, and the City of Chattanooga. The areas in concern for the study are in yellow on your slide at the moment in time. So College Hill Courts, which is 80 years old, it represents 490 plus housing units, and Gateway Tower, which is 150 plus housing units. The replacement of these distressed housing assets is of grave concern for the Housing Authority, and so this plan creates a roadmap, if you will, for the next 10 years of replacement of primarily these units on city and CHA land. So I'll give you the rundown of the unit mix. That represents about 546 households. The entire district that I mentioned to you earlier is about 1,500 families, 1,514 to be exact, family units in that boundary. The replacement goals are a one-for-one replacement of the deeply subsidized units, which I have at 629 households right now, and then an add of an affordable mix within that boundary. And this is again on city and CHA land of about 445 units. That's 25% of the overall net that we hope to gain. And the net is about 1,783 units on CHA and city land. So this is what you're approving here. I hope you hear is an affordable housing strategy right adjacent to our downtown, right adjacent to developing districts nearby. Page 114 of the plan that you received in your packet really identifies this market rate mix. And so you should drill in on that if you're very concerned about it. Plan also identifies, next slide, improvements long-term for ways in which the community could leverage infrastructure to better connect the community. We heard a lot from residents that they feel isolated in their community from both the Bend site and developments happening adjacent on the river and downtown. Next slide. Which includes in this slide that you're looking at a beautiful rendering of the extension of 12th Street. 12th Street in that former rendering, in that former slide, connects over to the Bend site and connects directly to the main boulevard that connects directly to the Tennessee River. Next slide. The plan also identifies some key strategies for open space improvement. So this is preservation of existing parks like Sheila Jennings Park, right next to James A. Henry School, and expansion of new pocket parks all through the district. So it's a open space preservation plan and open space expansion plan. We all know how important open spaces are to our communities and within our neighborhoods. Next slide. It also identifies a strategy for restoration of James A. Henry, which will well into, this is a former elementary school, historic elementary school right in the heart of the neighborhood, for expansion of Head Start seats in the community, expansion of the Splash Youth Arts Program, which Charlie Newton runs, a health clinic, and so on and so forth, which would be a fantastic program asset for this community. Next slide. We heard from residents over and over again that the type of housing that they want to see is not high-rise housing, but more lower scale housing. And so the highest density that you're seeing, this plan recommends key strategic sites for new blocks with the scale of housing that's appropriate and with resident input. The highest scale housing is 5 to 7 story housing, as you would probably imagine on the outer flanks on Main Street and on ML King, and then stepping down to lower scale cottage style 2 and 3 story within the neighborhood proper. Next slide. It also recommends, as you see from this rendering, an extension of Boynton Drive, so an expansion of the current street network again on the south side of the property, which includes maintaining historic assets like the flagpole, which is in the current center of College Hill Courts. It's a gathering place, and it's a gathering place in this slide in a main public park in the center of Boynton Drive extended. Next slide. The plan recommends key locations for mixed use opportunities. There's not much in this footprint, but again, as you would imagine, it recommends it on Main Street corridors, on ML King corridors, and some very, very strategic locations in that area 3, that bubble that you'll see in the heart of the community next to that purple form, which is the James A. Henry School restoration. Next slide. So overall, I just want to say, the plan recommends a roadmap for incremental replacement of the housing in the district, but expansion of affordable housing in the area. It's a critical roadmap of how a neighborhood, historic in its assets, historic in its people who have lived here for years, can grow and stay here and not be displaced. We won an award, I'm really proud to say, with the Congress of New Urbanism for an anti-displacement strategy It's a national award. And so I'm here to ask your good graces to approve this plan so it can garner support and be a roadmap for planning for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Dr. Highland.
Real quick. Excuse me, quick question. Is there any plan for housing these folks are you going to be changing the property they're living on now, or they will reside there while you're developing?
That's an excellent question. If you would go back about 6 slides there. Yes. Maybe even one more. Let's go back to that second slide that we showed. So that purple piece of property is one that went through mandatory referral. I believe it was last month with y'all. And that is a city-owned parcel on 12th Street. And so the strategy is to include that parcel on 12th Street in a build first strategy. So the Housing Authority is in the process of right now releasing an RFP for a master developer who would develop that site as the first 2 blocks of housing. It's about 109, it could contain about 119 housing units. And that would be the first site for residents of College Hill Courts to have first choice to move on that site. So once we start that process, you can kind of see how the phasing might work down the road. And that's what I mean by incremental. Excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman.
Eric, thank you very much for this presentation. I am fortunate to have heard quite a bit about this project through my community work and then with the work on the city council. It's a tremendous work product, and I know that the residents are excited, and I think other people in the city are excited. And also to see the way that the capital stack is really shaping up, that the vision is understood and we're making moves. So I would like to make a motion to approve this plan.
Second. Thank you. Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Mr. Maybe.
Sorry, I'll keep it very, very brief here. I promise. I just want to thank Mr. Myers as well. I'm extremely excited about this plan. So the West Side community has been great for years, but I've always thought the potential is unlimited there with its proximity to the river and downtown. Just an awesome, and I think it's this type of concept we have people with diverse incomes living in the same area, going to the same schools. It's really what I think can work to make a neat community. So thank you for your work on that.
Yes, thank you. Great plan. Any more discussion? Have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for what you do.
Okay, a few more items. Staff updates. Do we have any staff updates?
No.
Thank you. Any public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Anderson, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? Has been seconded. All those in favor? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Before I make the motion to adjourn, I just want to acknowledge Brenda Jean Adamson, one of our new members of the Planning Commission, is here today. Thank you. She sat through this even though she's not a member yet.
It's good. It's good training. Well, yes, welcome. We'll see you next month.
And hopefully next month, everybody can be here. We may need everybody again next month.
Okay.
If you can't be here, let us know.
Be here if you need to. And Mr. Rennick has parking passes if you need one in the parking garage. We are adjourned. Thank you.